Hey everybody, welcome to Adapt or Perish, episode 75, which is crazy. And with this minor milestone episode, it's time for more Jane Austen. This time, we're looking at the classic Sense and Sensibility. Before we get into it, though, let's talk about our next episode. I should say right off the bat that with our next episode, I've made a very petty decision. When Ariel convinced me to do Flowers in the Attic, I had no idea what kind of lurid, trashy, and honestly really fun ride that I had in store, and ever since I've been trying to decide how I would get back at her. Everyone, I figured it out. We are going to Detroit in the near future of 1987 to talk about someone who is part man, part machine, and all cop. You might be saying, I didn't know Jane Austen wrote RoboCop, but we look at lots of different things on this show. We'll be watching Paul Verhoeven's original 1987 movie, as well as Jose Padilla's 2014 remake. We hope you give it a listen in 2 weeks on Tuesday, September 22nd. I also wanted to call out an amazing email that we got from Lauren on the subject of our discussion of 2003's Pride and Prejudice, a Latter-day Comedy, and The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Part 3 of our recent Pride and Prejudice series. I can't even tell you how amazing it was to get this email. We had so many questions about the community, and Lauren delivered. As a member of the church herself and living in similar communities, she answered basically all of our questions, too numerous to discuss here, but I want to boil it down to one theme. Basically, the movie was way more plausible than we expected. Taking it as read that Lizzie was getting pressure from her mom to get married, even though she wasn't a character in the movie, appropriate and plausible. Lizzie still being an undergrad in her mid-20s, appropriate and plausible. Lots of multicultural roommates of a wide variety of ages, appropriate and plausible. Lauren, I hope you hear this because it was one of the best emails we've ever gotten. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections about today's episode that you'd like to hear on the show, remember to email adapterperishcast@gmail.com or tweet at us using the AdaptCast hashtag. If you enjoy the show, we'd love it if you would share that with the world by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/adaptcast. We've got a patron-only community and our bi-weekly bonus show, Adapt or Perish Plus, with episodes releasing every Tuesday between episodes of this show. We hope you check it out. Show notes from this and all other episodes can be found at adapterperishcast.com. And with that, on with the show, Adapt or Perish, Episode 75, Sense and Sensibility. To Adapt or Perish, a podcast about adaptation. I'm Jeremy Latour.
Why are you whispering?
There's a baby sleeping in the other room. It's been very stressful getting him to bed at night, and this time took a while, and I just want to make sure that he's okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to be whispering this entire episode.
I don't know that this is sustainable.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. Jeremy accidentally woke him up and felt so bad about it, and it was terrible.
I'm assuming anyone who's listening who has kids has done this before, where you get them down and they're so peaceful and they're just a beautiful little angel, and then you just kick
walk
something.
into the door, yeah.
Like you walk into the door or knock something over, and then what you have is you have your tiny baby. You can see them in the light of the doorway, waking up, looking over to see you leaving. And that, I can only imagine, is a very stressful thing. And that happened tonight. And it has been a rough couple of nights, I tell you what.
Yes, welcome to Adapt or Perish, coming to you almost live from this Friday night for our Tuesday release.
It's going to be fine.
If you're hearing this on a Wednesday, you will know that not everything went absolutely perfectly in our lives between Friday and Tuesday.
We've never missed a release day.
No, it's got to happen sometime.
I don't plan on starting now.
Yeah, no one ever plans on it.
Well, no, here's what we do. If we know we're going to miss a release day, we just say, we made this one a two-parter, and then we just release the first half of it.
We have actually done that before.
But it turned out fine.
I mean, we literally were going to the hospital to have our baby, and we still had not 100% determined that we were going to be running reruns. We still in the back of our minds were thinking, well, maybe we can get a show out. We could not.
I'm very happy we did those reruns.
Yeah, that was a good idea.
But actually, that's a good segue because
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about that one where we split it up into like 3 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
That's Pride and Prejudice. That wasn't even that long ago.
Yeah.
And now we're back. We're doing Jane Austen again.
But we're not splitting it up.
No, the one episode.
We're here.
One
We're
episode.
staying until the thing is done.
That is a fucking fact.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
I don't know where to start with this.
Okay.
Where should we start?
We've had a
with
week.
this?
We've had a week. We've had quite a week.
I forgot how to do. I've forgotten to do what little of this I would say I know how to do.
Yeah. So here we are. Good night.
Jane Austen, well-known lady. She something I didn't know about this book, Sense and Sensibility, published in 1811. I didn't know. Like, I think I knew that it was published anonymously.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was not published under Jane Austen.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what the line was. Like, it wasn't like by anonymous.
Right. It was by a lady.
By a lady.
Yes.
I didn't know that, and it was a delight to find that out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, because like they needed to know it was by a lady. So like, because if men were to read it, their penises would fall off.
Well,
so
yeah.
they needed to be warned.
Hang on. No, I'm good.
Oh, you okay?
Yeah.
Maybe that's not true anymore. It was only true back in the times.
That is clearly not.
I mean, we don't know.
Can I say something?
Yes.
What a good book.
It's good.
I'd never read it before.
Huh.
And I'll say this. I actually, 2 things about it. One, I enjoyed reading it way more than Pride and Prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked reading Pride and Prejudice. I liked it. There was a lot of good stuff in that book. There was a lot of good drama. I really appreciated how kind of modern the emotional connections were between the characters. But I wouldn't say it was like a fun book.
Mm-hmm.
It's an enjoyable book.
Yeah.
This was a fun book.
It was very fun.
Like, this one reminds me of Forster.
Yeah.
Honestly. Like, this is like proto Forster, which was super, super cool.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone hasn't listened to our Howard's End and Room with a View episodes, I would suggest listening to those at some point for our views on E.M. Forster. But I loved it. I thought it was super, super funny. I laughed quite a lot while I was reading this book.
Yes. It was very funny. I finished reading it probably about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, but for what? Like, how many times have you read it
I've
before?
read it before. I read it before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just we were getting ready to record, and I realized I had another 30 to 40 pages left in the book. Oops. So you had never read this before. I'd read
No.
it before. What about it did you find so funny? What did you enjoy most about it?
So So in the story of the book, should we talk about the story for a second?
We always think we are not going to talk about the story. We're going to talk about other things first, and then we realize we have to talk about the story because otherwise what we have to say makes no sense.
Okay.
But why don't you say what you liked about it, and then we'll do the story.
Okay, well, I will talk about one aspect of the story really quickly, just to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Great.
That the Sense and Sensibility is referring to the 2 sisters, Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood, one who's very sensible and one who feels her feelings really hard.
Yeah.
Sense and Sensibility. And they are, by all accounts, the main characters of the book, and it's about their love stories and the people they fall in love with and the people that fall in love with them, and so many other complicated things happen, but that's like the main crux of the book. Would you agree with that?
I would.
That's a very, very reductive view of it. I feel like the thing that I wouldn't have wanted to see was a book that said, well, Eleanor, the sensible one, she's ridiculous and too sensible, and Marianne's got it figured out because she knows that feeling is the right way to go. I also wouldn't have liked to see, oh my God, thank God Eleanor is the one with any sense, because Marianne is crazy and Eleanor she's doing real well. She's on the right path right now, and Marianne is nuts. I wouldn't have liked that either.
Yeah.
But instead, I feel like Austen, I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this, but I really think she threads the needle really nicely where they are both presented as flawed people.
Mm-hmm.
And you at times feel very sympathetic and I feel very empathetic towards both of them. But also at times I think, well, you know what? Eleanor doesn't need to be as sensible as she's being right now. And I think Marianne could probably take it down a notch or two. But I think because she does such a good job of showing you everyone as a complete character, I think that's where the opportunities for comedy come.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like if you took the story too seriously, you might buy into like Marianne's emotional state throughout the story.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on who you are reading it, maybe you do read it and go, because a huge part of the book is she's jilted by someone she thought loved her.
Mm-hmm.
And you find out that he's a cad and an asshole, but would you say she overreacts or just reacts?
Oh, she probably overreacts a little bit.
Right? And that's okay.
But it comes out of feeling her feelings very hard,
Right.
as you mentioned before.
But you can overreact to something. That's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I can definitely see someone reading it and go, like, depending on what their emotional state was, looking at it and going, she is not overreacting at all. She is reacting the appropriate amount.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very serious way of reading it.
Yeah.
But she is overreacting a little bit, which is where I think some of the comedy comes from.
Yeah. So what you're saying is the characters feel like real people instead of caricatures. Like sense is closer to sensibility than you would think. You know, it's like when we say we're at like 55 and 45%,
Yeah.
even though we don't agree.
Mm-hmm.
We're not at like 100% and 0.
Right.
Like here's an example. This is a minor character, but there's a character I really enjoy named Mr. Palmer, and our main characters, our heroines, first meet him in the context of like a bigger party, and he's being kind of antisocial and kind of annoying, and like it talks about how he's like insulting his wife and insulting his mother-in-law and all this stuff, and he just seems like kind of an unpleasant person. And then they go to stay with that family in his house, and there's like this little paragraph about how like when Eleanor saw him every day, she realized he's actually a really nice person and like very kind and a good host, and like would do anything for them, and is like does them like some services that out of the goodness of his heart.
Mm-hmm.
So it just goes to show like if he were a caricature, he would just be ridiculous all the time. But he's a real person with some quirkiness to him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just a minor character. And that's how detailed that character is drawn. So
Mm-hmm.
imagine how, our main characters are drawn.
Yeah, I feel like another place where a lot of the comedy comes from, and this is the thing that reminds me of Forster so much, is just kind of the class system. Like the higher class you go, I think the more ridiculous Austen wants to paint you
Mm-hmm.
in this book in particular.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily feel that in Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
Like I think like there was a bunch of people, look at Bingley and Darcy and the Bingley sisters. Bingley's just really nice and affable. Darcy has his problems that, we've talked about at length. And Bingley's, I'm making the assumption that anyone who is interested in Sense and Sensibility has also a passing understanding of Pride and Prejudice.
I think that's a reasonable assumption.
Safe to say.
Yeah.
But like his sisters aren't presented as like buffoons of that class.
Mm-hmm.
They're antagonists.
Right.
Like they're not funny.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find any of them funny. They are antagonists for what Lizzie's going through.
Mm-hmm.
She is the protagonist to their antagonist in so many different ways. Whereas in this one, I never really felt like anyone was being set up as like a strict antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Like Willoughby kind of,
Yeah.
but not really actively, because you only find out about his bad stuff later when he's not there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lucy Steele is also an antagonist.
I wonder how much of that is in the text and how much is in whatever anyone brings to it when they're reading it.
Oh.
Because we saw so many different interpretations of it in the adaptations we're going to talk about, where like you could see her as being like at worst, like what is the worst version of her? Like what are some characteristics of like the worst kind of Lucy Steele?
She's jealous, she's vain, she is really passive aggressive. I think passive aggressive is the way to describe her.
Mm-hmm. But like what's the best version of her?
Well, I mean, the best version of her is a version where she's totally oblivious, but that from the text is clear that it's not true.
Yeah.
In the text, it specifically says she clearly knows that Edward is attracted to Eleanor and is explaining in so many words to Eleanor that like he is hers and she needs to back off.
Which and her understanding is that that's the case.
Right.
I'm just saying that her innocence as a character, I don't think she is Arch on the page. You can play her as Arch in an adaptation. You can write her that way. But I don't think Austen wrote her that way necessarily.
I guess I just don't know that I necessarily agree with that just because of what the text says.
I guess like when I say Arch, I mean like really, really overt.
Yeah.
Like I think there's a difference between...
She's not like comically evil.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Okay.
Like that's what I mean.
That's fair.
Whereas like look at the Bingley sisters.
Right.
Like they were, I would say like not comically evil, but like objectively evil.
A little more ridiculous.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Well, we've now talked about all these characters, but have not explained who they are. Should we do the plot?
Yeah, let's do it. Do you want to try?
Yeah, I can try.
Go for it.
Okay. As always, there's going to be a little more background at the beginning. So don't get nervous that this is going to take a very long time, even if I go into more detail at the beginning, because it is important to establish who who these people are.
I think it's amazing. You really sound like you're talking to the audience.
Yeah, I'm not.
No, I understand that. I know who you're talking to. Message received.
Tapping his watch. Okay. The Dashwood sisters. Eleanor is the oldest. Then there is Marianne, and they're about 17 and 19. And they have a younger sister, Margaret, who's about 13, 14. They live with their mother, Mrs. Dashwood, in a large estate called Norland, and unfortunately, their father has just died. Their father married twice, and they have an older half-brother who, unfortunately, due to like hand-wavy, entailment, whatever, is the only person who is allowed to inherit the estate, and the second wife and daughters get absolutely nothing other than a forced promise that is not fulfilled that the older brother, John Dashwood, would do something for them. And it's a very funny scene between him and his wife that I think we see in every version because it's the beginning of the book and it's very funny when he talks about all the things that he's not going to do for them. So they are actually forced to move out of their large palatial home, their country home, because it now belongs to the brother. And they go to live in a small cottage in a place called Barton.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yes.
I feel like I want to amend something I said before.
Okay.
In terms of there not really being any like out and out antagonists. Fanny Dashwood.
Fanny's the fucking worst.
Fanny. So John's wife, Fanny. I don't know that I like totally take back what I said before, but I would like to amend it and just add a little color to it and say that, yeah, Fanny just sucks 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually does want to do something really good for them, and she talks him out of it.
Yes.
So I apologize. She wins,
Yes.
and they leave. And other stuff happens there, but yeah, they go to this cottage.
Yeah, so it's actually very important that you brought up Fanny, because what we need to know about Fanny is that she has two brothers. One is named Edward, and he's very nice and very handsome and very diffident.
He's very shy and diffident.
He's very shy and diffident.
Do you know what diffident means?
Yeah, it's like modest because you're shy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It basically means shy.
It basically just means shy.
Yeah.
And she has another brother, Robert Ferrars, who is the younger brother, who is kind of a
punchable douchebag?
I was going to say it like a dandy. You know, he's into like toothpick cases and things.
Literally.
So Eleanor and I'm going to say I'm going to mispronounce her name because it's Eleanor, but it's hard to say Eleanor with an American accent. So I'll probably just say Eleanor, even though it's spelled differently. Eleanor is attracted to Mr. Edward Ferrars. They form a mutual attachment during the few weeks that he is visiting his sister Fanny while they're all still living in Norland together. But Fanny gives Mrs. Dashwood a bit of a warning, kind of warns her off and says he will never be allowed to marry this poor girl, your daughter, because he needs to marry someone rich. And Mrs. Dashwood takes the hint and moves them all away to a cottage in a place called Barton. Which is owned by a relative of hers who we're about to meet. That is Sir John Middleton. He has a wife, Lady Middleton, and she has a mother, Mrs. Jennings, and they all live together at a big house called Barton Park, which is but a short walk from Barton Cottage, where our friends, the Dashwoods, are now living with their only one or two servants. So terrible to live in a cottage with very few servants.
And I'm checking my notes. Sir John Middleton and Mrs. Jennings and his wife, they are all jerks who are not at all friendly to the Dashwoods.
This is untrue. Lady Middleton is not super friendly, but Sir John is very friendly, and Mrs. Jennings just loves these girls, loves them, especially because she has two daughters of her own, but she has gotten them married off, so now she needs a new project, and she hits upon these two lovely Dashwood sisters. I'd like to take a moment to talk about the characters of these two sisters, because it's very important. As you mentioned, one is Sense, is Eleanor. She's very practical. She has her emotions on like a tight lead. She keeps herself to herself. She's very calm. She's very practical. And her mother and sister sometimes think that she doesn't have emotions or that she's very cold, but actually she just has a tight leash on herself. She's restrained. She doesn't show them all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas Marianne is she's like 16, so she's very romantic. She loves poetry and music, and she has all of these like romantic ideals. even when they are clearly nonsense and don't make sense. One of her favorite romantic ideals is your first love is your only love, and once you have loved, you can never love again. Which, as her older sister points out, is a hard belief to hold without reflecting poorly on the character of their own father, who married twice after his first wife died. So that's
I
never.
remember reading that and thinking, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's never really explained. But she's very romantic. She has sensibilities, whereas Eleanor has sense. And the mother, I would say, is a little closer to the character of Marianne. She's not very practical. She is fairly romantic, but she's a good mother. They really, really love her a lot.
Which is weird. You think that she would be much more mature at the age of, let me check my notes, 30 and 5?
Yeah, she's 40.
Oh,
she's,
40.
She's
Right,
40.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Well, there's this really funny part in the beginning where Fanny and John are talking about like how they might provide for this family in a way that's the least inconvenient to themselves. And they're like, well, maybe we should like give her an annuity of £100 a year or something like that. And Fanny's like, why, John, you must know people always live forever when there's an annuity to be paid them, which is a really funny line. And if she should live 15 years, we'll be completely taken in. And John is like, my dear, she cannot possibly live half that long. She's 40. She probably live another 15 years.
I honestly want to know, is that a product of the time, or is that Jane Austen going, how dumb are these people?
No, I think it's Jane Austen going, how dumb are these people? I feel like if you lived to 40 and your children were adults, like you lived through like childhood and then you lived through childbirth and you were a widow and definitely therefore not going to have any more children, like the chances of you living from 40 to 60 were probably pretty good.
Yeah.
Just as good as we have now, unless you get something that needs antibiotics that they didn't have. Anyway.
Yeah, God help you if you cough blood into a handkerchief.
Yeah. It's never good. You're just gone. But she's in fine form. She's a very healthy woman. She'll be fine. And then they have this little sister, Margaret, who is just cute, but we don't hear much about her except when she's like at the dinner table saying things that she oughtn't.
Would you call her narratively expendable?
I mean, clearly so, because we did not see very many Margarets in the versions that we watched. Margaret was mostly gone. So this all happens. And okay, so we know that Eleanor is in love with Edward, who is her sister-in-law's brother, which is fine. And
half-sister-in-law's brother.
Right. And Marianne has two suitors. One is Colonel Brandon, who is a man of the advanced age of 35.
That's how I got mixed up.
Who is a friend of, who's a friend of Sir John. And he's quite rich, not as rich as Mr. Darcy, but like a rich man. And lives in a nice house and has a tragic secret in his past, but is ripe for marriage and is very attracted to Marianne. And then there is another young man whose name is Willoughby. And he is very dashing and very handsome and very into poetry and very cute. And Marianne likes him quite a lot. And they are improper together.
There's canoodling.
They canoodle. You are not apparently in those days before you were engaged. You're not really supposed to like be dating someone and like have it be known that this is like your boyfriend. Like you're not really supposed to show such a preference to one person over another until you become engaged. And then like, for example, it is very improper. Marianne writes him a lot of letters. Remember when they go to London,
Yeah.
She writes him all those letters. It is very improper if you are a single lady to write letters to a single man unless you are engaged. So improper that at one point Eleanor says, well, she's written to him, so they must be engaged. Like she can't fathom writing to him unless they're engaged.
Yeah.
They are not engaged. They just, Marianne feels that proprieties are for chumps. And so these girls are quite poor. They don't have very good prospects for marriage, but luckily they have these men in their lives. Well, we learn that Edward is actually unavailable because he has been engaged these 4 years to a young woman named Miss Lucy Steele. while he was studying at her uncle's house, I guess.
She's a light antagonist.
Yeah, she's a light antagonist. And Miss Lucy Steele makes very clear to Eleanor at their first meeting that she has been secretly engaged to Edward Lowe these many years. So Eleanor has a sad, but because this was told to her in confidence, she cannot reveal it to anyone. And so she just has to suffer through people like teasing her about being into Edward when she knows that he can never be hers. And Marianne is teased about Willoughby and about Colonel Brandon.
And Mrs. Jennings is convinced that Brandon is interested in Eleanor.
And like she kind of goes back and forth. Mrs. Jennings is great. We're going to come to her in a second.
It's all very funny. It's all very CW in like the best way.
Yes.
I mean that in the best way possible.
Until one day, Willoughby comes to their house, suddenly announces he's leaving forever, and he returns to London. And everyone is very confused and sad, doesn't know what happened. Shortly thereafter, Mrs. Jennings says, hey, I'm going to go to London for the season, and you girls should come with me and stay with me. Like, I really want you to. I'll be lonely in my house by myself now that my daughter Charlotte is married.
And Margaret is like, oh, and me too, right? And her mom's like, no, you're narratively expendable.
No.
You're staying here with me.
No, she's like, we're just going to stay here by ourselves and just, do our homeschooling Zoom calls and it'll be fine. And they're all going to go to London together, which they do. And when they arrive, Marianne is very anxious and very sad, and she wants to see Willoughby, and she can't understand why he hasn't called upon them. And finally, after, days and days and weeks of her being so upset and pining for him and writing him all these letters, they run into him at a ball, and he is cold and awful, and he won't talk to her and runs away, and she is so upset as to almost throw her into an illness. And it comes out that he is actually engaged to a very, very, very rich woman who he threw Marianne over to marry this very wealthy woman. And everybody's very upset with him and thinks he's a cad, but in their heart kind of understands because he needs to have money. So Willoughby is kind of like Mr. Wickham. Apparently, Jane Austen did not like the letter W. He's just a bit of a cad.
Fair to say.
We also learned something else about Willoughby. So this, I'm going to get this confused, because they literally made this backstory in every version that we watched. It was a little bit different. And in no case, I think except for the 2008 version, was it the same as the book. But suffice it to say, Colonel Brandon has a young ward who many people suspect to be his natural daughter, his love child, if you will. She isn't. She's the child of someone that he loved very much when they were young and had a series of unfortunate circumstances happen to her, and she had this child and died. This young girl is about 15, and we learn...
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Was in the book, remind me, because I also got confused,
Yeah.
and you know the book better than I do. Was the father his brother, or was that something that was in only some of the adaptations?
The father was not his brother.
Okay.
The father was like someone that this girl, some unknown person.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry,
Yes.
I'm sorry. I want to make sure I was clear.
Yes, no, you're clear. The father was not his brother in the book. We learn that she sort of went astray, much like Lydia in Pride and Prejudice. She was seduced and actually has now borne an illegitimate child. She has been confined, and the father of that illegitimate child is Willoughby. So he is more than a cad. He is whatever is worse than a cad.
And Brandon found this out like after he had met Willoughby.
Yeah.
Like he had to leave one day, and it was very dramatic.
It was very
and
dramatic.
Willoughby was like, "Oh, what an asshole is he? Come, Marianne, come canoodle with me." And then you find out what was really going on.
Yes, and they have to fight a duel because
Which
of the
I
dishonor.
missed. I completely missed.
Yes, there is a duel.
It was not, because the word duel isn't in there.
It's not.
No, but so I need to know, like, in order to understand it, I needed to know the context and the different phrases that were used. So what are the words that are used in the book that to anyone who knows would know that it's a duel, but to the dum-dum over here, I didn't know that.
I believe he says to Eleanor, "We met by appointment." And she shakes her head at the thought of resolving a dispute in such a way, but knows that as a soldier, she can't really say anything to him about it. The end.
That's fair.
Yeah. So we learned that Willoughby's actually not just fickle, but terrible. And Marianne, I suppose, is a little relieved by this, but soon falls into a fever and becomes very, very ill. It's also revealed to Edward's family that he's become secretly engaged to Lucy Steele, and he is disowned and refuses to give up Lucy because of honor, etc. And so they go off together, and Eleanor presumes that they are to be married to each other.
Ironically, the thing that makes Eleanor love him even more is the reason they can never be together.
Yes.
He's such a good person.
So Marianne's been very sad for a long time, and Mrs. Jennings says, let's go visit my daughter Charlotte, who's just had this baby, for a little bit, and then from there it'll be much easier to get you girls home. So they go to the Palmer's house. That's Mr. Palmer that I was telling you about, and his wife Charlotte and their baby. And there Marianne falls very, very ill. She is like to die. They send for the mother, and the mother's on the way, and Colonel Brandon reveals that he is really in love with Marianne, and then Willoughby shows up and makes confession of everything, and
everything's going through Eleanor.
Everything's going
point.
through Eleanor,
Yeah.
like poor Eleanor, and still nobody knows how like wretched she is about this whole situation.
Like
with
no one
Edward.
even knows that Willoughby came except Eleanor.
Yeah.
Much.
And Willoughby explains that like he actually really was in love with Marianne, but like his aunt found out about the situation with Eliza and kicked him out. So then he had nothing, and he had to go and find a girl with a lot of fortune. And Eleanor's like, I mean, I guess that's very sad for you, but also it was directly the direct consequence of your own behavior. So like, I don't feel that bad. And now he's married and he's very unhappy. And she's like, you owe your wife some respect. Like, get out of here and do not speak to me again or my sister. She will never have anything to do with you ever again.
You see, Willoughby, you see how you're darkening our door?
Mm-hmm. Do not do that.
Don't do that.
Don't darken
Don't
it.
Stop it. Stop it.
Yes. So Marianne recovers. She learns through the course of time to respect Colonel Brandon, and they do end up getting married when she's about 19.
Not
and
just respect, love.
Love and respect. She opens her eyes to the goodness of Colonel Brandon.
But not only that, she opens her eyes to the passion of Colonel Brandon, because the whole thing at the beginning is that she says he's nothing.
Yeah.
He has no emotion whatsoever. He's not. She makes it very clear the type of person she wants to be into, and that's why she likes Willoughby. But then it turns out that like Brandon does like some of the things that she likes.
Yes.
It's not like it's in there. It's not like super explicit.
No,
but
you're
like
right.
it's in there. She doesn't just say, I can see he's a good person. She's like, oh, I actually can see him as someone I would fall in love with.
Right. Despite the fact that he's 35 and she's 17, which is actually not good.
No.
It's not. Like, even back then, like, there's even talk in the book about, like, that's a pretty big age gap. Like, it's not great. But not, like, unheard of. And Edward comes to the house, and he says, and they think that he's now married to Lucy Steele. There's this sort of misunderstanding.
This is the comedy I'm talking about, because I feel like one of the best jokes in the entire book is when, like, was it Mrs. Dashwood says to him, is Mrs. Ferrars here?
Yeah.
And he says,
no, my mother's in London.
like, that's a solid joke.
Yes.
Because it does so many different things. Like, it is funny, it makes everyone look funny, and also it gives you lots of information. It's just this is like one of my favorite moments from the whole book.
Yeah. But the thing that I like about it too is like the talking at cross purposes lasts for about 10 seconds. Like they figure out immediately what the problem is. Because
it's long enough for it to be funny, but not long enough for it to be really annoying.
Really uncomfortable. Yeah. Because Eleanor immediately is like, no, she means Mrs. Edward Ferrars, like your wife. And he's like, oh, I think you have not heard the news. Lucy Steele just went off and married my brother Robert, because his mother so Edward is the oldest son, but his mother, like, I guess, irrevocably transferred his fortune to his brother Robert. I don't know exactly the mechanism of this. And Lucy, now finding that she was engaged to someone without any money, went after Robert instead and married him. So now Edward is free to marry where he chooses, assuming that everybody's fine with being very poor because he has no money. And Eleanor, of course, is delighted by this news, and she bursts into tears of joy. And he proposes and is accepted. So Colonel Brandon offered him, he wants to be in the church, and Colonel Brandon offered him the living of his neighborhood. So they go to live in the parsonage of the big house, while Colonel Brandon and Marianne go to live in the big house. And everybody starts it almost sets it up for a sequel, because the very last page is like, and by this time Margaret was old enough for people to tease her about having suitors. So like you really think like there's going to be another book like maybe about Margaret, but of course there's not.
I just can see people like in 1811 reading it and going like, oh geez, oh, I can't wait, oh man, oh.
And that's the end of the book. It ends happily. End.
One of the things that I didn't think about, I compared it to Pride and Prejudice already, but I'm going to do that again. This is not going to be the last time that Pride and Prejudice comes up in this episode. But like, I'm just thinking about what the differences are between the books in terms of the tone. And like I mentioned before, that Pride and Prejudice isn't as funny as this, because in Pride and Prejudice, there is like a sword hanging over everybody's head the entire time. Because what is, if the daughters don't marry wealthy, what is the implication?
That they will be basically destitute when their father dies.
Exactly. Like they're going to lose the house
Yeah.
and they're going to be kicked out because it's not going to them.
Right. In this, they've already lost the house.
Exactly.
The house is gone.
Like it's not going to get worse.
Yeah.
And like they're kind of fine. And Sir John Middleton and his fan, Mrs. Jennings, they're great.
Like they'll never let them come to any harm.
Yeah. Like there is no sword hanging over everybody's head. Like the things you're invested in Pride and Prejudice are the characters I like going to find love, but B, is the family going to be okay?
Yeah.
In this one, you can just be invested in the love story, and it's really nice. It's very refreshing to only be invested in a love story and not worry about people being destitute.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So we watched 4 Sense and Sensibilities, 3 miniseries and a movie. And the years for these, all called Sense and Sensibility, easily enough, 1971, 1981, 1995, and 2008.
Nice spread.
Good spread. I like to get a spread of Jane Austen. It was good that we could find the one from the 70s. I think for a while we thought we weren't going to be able to find it. And and then it was on YouTube or something.
Mm-hmm. I was shocked, by the way, that there was nothing prior to 1971.
Yeah, I feel like there was some story about why that was. Like it got optioned in the 40s, but like then never made, and someone just sat on it forever.
Because like we talked about, again, Pride and Prejudice, we talked about the Laurence Olivier movie. I feel like the tone of that would have fit Sense and Sensibility way more.
Yeah, I think I read something that like it was supposed to be made and just like it never happened.
Yeah, turned out fine.
But it would have been fun to watch an old one if such a thing existed.
Mm-hmm.
But 1971, BBC miniseries, your basic 1971 Jane Austen miniseries. So surprising. One of the biggest surprises, I would say, that we've watched in something that I think we were expecting to really dislike. And both of us found things in it that we not only like enjoyed, but like loved, and in some cases thought was like the best version of that thing that we saw in all 4 versions.
Well, we also had the context too, again, of doing Pride and Prejudice, because it was the same kind of thing. There was like an early 70s miniseries and then an early 80s miniseries, like with some of the same people and like scripted by the same people. And that was basically, we didn't like either of those.
Yeah, the actress who played Charlotte Lucas in the 80s Pride and Prejudice played Eleanor in the 80s Sense and Sensibility.
Yeah. So I had extraordinarily low expectations going into 1971. I thought the spectrum was going to be, at worst, I'm going to hate it, and at best, I will think it is fine and forgettable, and we can just move on.
Yeah.
But as you say, there is some fucking delightful stuff in this one. I loved it from like minute 1.
Yeah.
I did the thing that I sometimes do that sometimes turns out well and sometimes turns out badly, where I turn to you like 10 minutes and go like, it could change at any minute, but if it stays this, I love this. Mm-hmm. This is super fun, despite its flaws, like despite its cardboard sets, and all the normal limitations of 70s and 80s BBC.
Yeah,
miniseries.
I mean, we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast before what wigs looked like before they invented lace front.
I've listened.
This is no exception. The wigs are uniformly terrible. Marianne's in particular is just awful. Oh, the actress who plays Eleanor in this,
Joanna David
is we both recognized her immediately because she's Mrs. Gardner from the 1995 Colin Firth, Jennifer Ely, Pride and Prejudice. Like as a very young woman, she's playing Eleanor, and then she's playing the aunt in Pride and Prejudice. 20 some years later. It's amazing.
Yeah, she's cute as a fucking button.
Adorable. Bad wig, but adorable.
Yeah, everyone had a bad wig.
Marianne's wig was the absolute worst. We disagreed more strongly on Marianne in this version than we've disagreed on almost anything in anything ever.
Probably. Who should go first?
I'll go first.
Well, so Eleanor, let's just kind of run through them really quickly.
Yeah.
What did you think of this version of Eleanor?
I thought she was great. I thought she was very sweet. She was very good. She's a good platonic ideal of an Eleanor.
Yeah, she was like boring enough that you can see the flaws in being as sensible as she is.
Yeah.
But also
not terribly boring.
Yeah, but not terribly boring. Like, she's still one of the two main characters, and I really cared about her.
Yeah.
I really liked her in this, and she, as I said, cute as a fucking button.
Adorable. Although
Yeah.
I guess I never picture Eleanor as being like that blonde, but that's just my mental picture.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, Marianne.
I did not care for this Marianne.
Mm-hmm.
I thought she was a lot. I thought she was so over the top. I felt like we never got a baseline on this Marianne to show like the difference between how she usually is and when she, was so elevated in her moods, like when they were in London together, because she was at 110% from the get-go. It didn't help that I hated her wig so much that I found it distracting. But literally I wrote down, these are my first two notes. Very elaborate hair. Marianne is a lot. And that was like the first scene, because that was before we even realized there was no Margaret in this version. Yeah, she just did nothing for me and continued to do nothing for all 4 episodes that we watched.
I have a metaphor for this, for the listening audience. I think have different attitudes towards sweet foods. So like, I want to describe a donut that I ate today.
Yeah.
It's from Union Square Donuts in Somerville, Massachusetts. It was a cookie dough filled donut.
It was stuffed with cookie dough.
Stuffed with cookie dough. Obviously, like, it's safe to eat cookie dough.
Yeah, of course.
I just want to be clear. And I ate it, and my assessment was, A, this is a lot, and B, you know what? Delicious, and this is a nice treat every now and then. What was your assessment of it?
Well, you left me. I said I wanted to try
a quarter.
it.
I left you a quarter of it.
Was it a quarter?
It was a quarter.
Okay, because I took that quarter and I ate about a quarter of the quarter,
Mm-hmm.
and I said that is sufficient for me. That is too sweet, and it makes my teeth hurt, and I don't like it. And not only did you eat the rest of that,
Are you gonna blow up my spot right now?
do you not want me to?
No, go for it. That's fine.
Not only did you eat the rest of it, you also brought me a donut, and I ate half of it. And then this morning, and then this evening, you said, "Can I have some of this donut that you left, this half donut?" And you ate, and I said you could have it. Like, it's not like you ate it without my consent. But you did eat another half donut of mine after eating that entire. I cannot emphasize enough. Like how jelly donut is stuffed with jelly. It was stuffed with cookie dough and also frosted.
Well, okay, so I do want to be clear. Yes, I am a bit of a fat kid. I do like my junk food. But the reason I bring this up is to say we just have different attitudes towards the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't think you're wrong. I just know you don't like sweet stuff as much.
Mhm.
And you know that I like things that are very sweet.
Yes.
So getting back to Marianne.
Yeah.
You said she was 110% and she was too much for you.
If Marianne was a donut, she would be stuffed with cookie dough.
Yeah, she was a donut stuffed with donuts.
Yes.
For whatever reason, that was what I wanted.
Yeah.
I was so there for Marianne in this version. Yeah, she's super over the top, but I found her so compelling. And that was the thing. I never felt like she was hamming it up.
Yeah.
I felt like she was playing it so genuinely. I felt like I, as an audience member, was supposed to understand that Marianne was overreacting to the situation she found herself in and the actions that other characters were taking. But I never felt that the actor played her trying to push that. I felt like she was taking it totally seriously.
Gotcha.
And I felt like she was living in the emotional reality of the character. She was just so genuine. And it was, you know what it was? It was the moments where there's that fantastic moment in it where Edward walks in and Eleanor's sitting there with Lucy Steele.
Yeah.
And he walks in, and in my mind, it will always and forever be Hugh Grant walking in and just going like, oh. And it's very funny.
It's very funny.
And they have a whole thing. But then Marianne comes into the room and not knowing about any of that stuff. And it's just like, Edward, thank God you're here.
Well, she's also looking terrible because she's
Yeah.
like starting to become ill at this point.
And I fucking loved it. That's like, I enjoy that scene in the book. I thought it was great in this show because she comes in looking absolutely insane because her emotions have just done so much to her and she's gone through so much. And she's just like, hello, Edward. I am so glad you're here for my sister because two people have to be in love. And love has to work for someone. But she played it so genuinely. Like, I didn't just look at it as something that was funny. I really felt for a character that wanted that for her sister because she loves her sister so much.
Like, I really appreciate for you that that's what you got out of it. Like, I think that's really great. I almost feel like we were watching a different movie because I just, like you said, like she felt so genuine. Like she felt like so.
I didn't say she felt genuine. I said I felt like she was acting genuinely.
Okay.
I felt like her emotions were genuine.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't say she was acting realistic.
Okay. I guess that's fair. I guess I misinterpreted what you meant by genuine. It just did not do it for me. It was over the top. It was so dramatic. It did not seem to fit in with anything anybody else was doing for me. However, I will say, it seems unfair of me to criticize you for your love of Marianne because I myself found a love. The love that dare not speak its name in this version.
What was the biggest surprise for you? What was the biggest pleasant surprise in all four of the Sense and Sensibilities that we watched?
I have to set this up for a second.
Okay.
In the 1995 version, so not the one we're talking about right this second, but the 1995 version, which was the only one of these, or no, I had seen the 2008, but the 1995 I'd seen many times. Mrs. Jennings, who is like the mother-in-law of Sir John Middleton, and she's Charlotte's mother and Lady Middleton's mother.
She's the matchmaker we talked about.
Yeah, and the girls go to stay with her in her house in London. In the 1995 version, that character is played by Elizabeth Spriggs, who, if you don't know who that is, you've seen her in something. She is an older British character actress. She is quite elderly in 1995 and also just a large elderly woman. So that was how I always pictured Mrs. Jennings. Mrs. Jennings did not have a sexuality to me whatsoever.
I'm still not sure that she had. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Mrs. Jennings in this version came on screen for the very first time, the very first scene with Mrs. Jennings, and I wrote down, holy shit, Mrs. Jennings is hot. She just was young, like a very young Mrs. Jennings, and was wearing like a dress with a lot of cleavage.
This is a very booby show, by the way.
It was a very booby show.
Yeah.
And she's just like just a lovely, curvy woman.
Vivacious. I would say is like a really good word for her.
Yes.
Very full of life.
Very full of life. Very attractive. Like certainly like not a young woman, but not an old woman by any stretch of the imagination. Like still willing to wear, décolletage, as they say, and like, sleeveless dresses and things. And I was like, who is this? I was like so into her. And then she spoke and I went, that voice. How do I know that voice?
You like grabbed me.
I grabbed you and I was like, is that Hyacinth Bouquet? Patricia Rutledge, I didn't know this, was extremely attractive as a young woman and played Mrs. Jennings in this 1971 version of Sense and Sensibility. And not only was Mrs. Jennings the character given more scenes and more lines and more to do than any Mrs. Jennings we saw, she stole the show.
Yeah.
She stole the show. I kept turning to you and saying, well, apparently Sense and Sensibility is about Mrs. Jennings, but like I was there for it.
And I want to be clear to anyone who doesn't know, because I'm not as familiar with Keeping Up Appearances as you are.
Yeah.
Like I know it's a thing, and like I know that Hyacinth is the main character because I've heard that.
Yeah.
But I really knew nothing about it until we did this. So when I look at Patricia Rutledge, I have no preconceived idea of who she is.
Yeah.
I also agree that she stole the show.
Yeah.
But I can imagine having an understanding and knowledge of Keeping Up Appearances makes it even more delightful.
Yes. And I was like doing all this research about Patricia Rutledge because I just like immediately became obsessed, and I was like, I think I understand something that's going on. There's an attraction between me and Patricia Rutledge. Apparently, it is rumored that Patricia Rutledge is a gay woman. She never married and had no children. And lived for many years with a female friend, which is fantastic. So I think now we're going to do the segment that we've been calling Ariel Doesn't Remember What Her Notes Are About. We have done this at least once before. So I'm going to read out my notes and we're going to try to parse them as best we can.
Which is good because I only had like one or two things that I wanted to. Can I mention one thing really quickly?
Of course you can.
Sir not appearing in this film. As I said, Margaret, narratively expendable, not in this version.
Oh, yeah. And also, like, female characters underwritten, obviously not applicable to anything by Jane Austen.
Yeah.
So, you know.
You'd have to try really hard.
It would have to be a very bad version indeed.
Yeah.
But we're good.
Let's go through your notes. Let's see what's going on.
Okay. Part 1, Mrs. Jennings is hot. Patricia Rutledge, all in caps. I wrote, that was not a hill. I think that's in reference to when Marianne falls down. She's just walking across a field and like falls.
They're walking through like the woods. It's like, it's not a hill. It's like there's a slope.
Yeah.
She definitely is going down.
It's not much of a slope.
No.
Okay. I wrote $2,000 a year, which I know is Colonel Brandon's income.
Yeah.
I don't know why I wrote that down specifically.
Maybe you're just like, maybe we should keep context of how much people are worth.
Maybe. I wrote Edward has a stutter. Self-explanatory.
I fucking loved Edward in this version.
He was pretty good.
I loved Edward in this version. He was so great. In fact, one of the things I was going to say is like the men in this one don't really do it for me, except for Edward.
Yeah.
Edward is fantastic. He can actually, this speaks to something bigger that I really enjoyed about this version. This version has a point of view. This version is not just looking at the text and saying we're just going to do what's in the book. It's looking at it and going, okay, if we do exactly what's in the book, it may not translate on the screen. So what are some choices that we can make that'll make the audience understand? So we're constantly told that Edward is like not comfortable speaking in front of people, and it isn't explicit that he has a stutter, but that's a choice you can make, and not every version we watched has that, but this version does, and it's not a crazy stutter, but it's there.
Yeah.
And the actor, I thought, sold it, and I thought he was delightful, and I thought he had so much adorable chemistry with Eleanor. I really, really enjoyed Edward in this one.
That's great. He was quite good. I wrote, Eleanor is dressed like Jane Austen. Oh yeah, there was one point so there's like one famous portrait of Jane Austen, and if you're familiar with Jane Austen, you can probably picture it in your head. She's wearing like sort of a light blue dress and like a little cap. And there is definitely a costume that Eleanor wears that is, in my mind, like a direct reference to that outfit, because she just looks like Jane Austen, which I thought was cool. Like I thought, as you say, a point of view. Like someone worked on this that cared about something. The other thing about the costumes that I noticed that I will say, again, the wigs were really bad. The costumes were fine, other than one thing that I'm going to come to. But I noticed the men all had these very distinctive shirts. They all had this like sort of starched, not a ruff, like more like a starched shirt front that stuck out like a fan from the front of their jacket. And I've never seen a shirt like that before, like in any Jane Austen or anything. And they were all wearing them. So again, clearly there was a costume designer with a point of view, which to your point, I think is great. Like I think it's great to have a point of view and not just be phoning it in. Note, no one has ever been more uncomfortable than Edward. I'm pretty sure that's when he comes in and Lucy's there.
Oh, it's
and he's
fantastic.
Just deeply, deeply uncomfortable.
It's fantastic.
I wrote, Mrs. Jennings is the main character. We already talked about that. And I wrote, this is my other note about the costumes. I wrote twin traveling outfits.
Ugh.
The two sisters have these outfits that they wear anytime they are traveling. That's like sort of a lime green dress and coat with like a sort of a pink or orange like accent, and they're wearing like these weird hats. It just looked really weird that they were dressed identically anytime they like had to travel somewhere together.
It's the kind of thing where if you saw someone wearing it in the show, you would think for 1 second, oh, that's awful.
Yeah, it's wow, what an ugly costume.
But then you wouldn't think about it anymore.
Yeah.
But if you see two people wearing it and matching,
yeah,
that makes you stop and think.
It really does. It really does. So yeah, that was all I had. I'm sorry to end on like such an anticlimax of like an ugly costume that I didn't like. Whoever wrote this screenplay apparently felt as strongly about Mrs. Jennings as I did, because Mrs. Jennings, like I cannot emphasize enough, is the main character of this version of Sense and Sensibility. She is in it all the way through from beginning to end. And while we were watching, I actually wasn't very far in my reread of the book, and I was thinking like, did I really like kind of miss the importance of Mrs. Jennings? Like, no, she's in it. She's a main character for sure, but like she's not the main character. And
She
just
doesn't she doesn't get any scenes by herself in the book.
yeah.
But in this one they actually give her like it's just her in the scene.
Like you see her after in the Palmer's house after Eleanor and Marianne and their mother finally leave, like after Marianne's been sick and gets better and like leaves for home, and you see this little reflection that she has. She's like, well, I'm so sad to be here by myself, but Charlotte will be here tomorrow and the baby, and like the camera just lingers on Mrs. Jennings. Like that's the resolution we get for Mrs. Jennings. She's just so happy to see her family and the baby and everybody. And it's just, Patricia Rutledge is so great. She looks great. I cannot emphasize enough.
We know.
She's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. I loved it.
I'm looking at my notes right here, and I guess there's only two other little things. It should only take me a minute, but like one person we didn't mention was Sir John Middleton in this one. I thought he was fucking perfect.
Oh, you loved him, yeah.
I loved him in this one.
He was like very country.
Very country and very overt and very funny and very intense, and I was just here for it. I was really here for like kind of out and out comic performances surrounding. Like I thought he and Patricia Rutledge were both fantastic in it, and I thought he matched her. And then the only other thing was just that this had a scene that I really appreciated, which was a scene showing Marianne going from not giving a shit about Colonel Brandon to suddenly being very interested in Colonel Brandon. And it's after she's sick, it's while she's convalescing, and he comes in. And I thought they had a very lovely conversation about literature. And he was very respectful of her opinion, and she shared her opinion freely, and he shared his opinions freely. And that was the thing that made her interested in him. Yeah. And he was already interested in her. But I thought it was a lovely little scene. I was invested in the characters. I appreciated it.
Awesome. Well, I think that's enough of 1971.
I agree.
10 years later, do you want to move on? 1981, once again, a BBC miniseries.
So after we finished 1971, and I turned to you, and I'd seen the movie before, but I didn't really remember it that much. I'd never seen 2008, and I never saw 1981. And this was the first time I was seeing 71. And I looked at you and I said, you know what? It almost never happens, but wouldn't it be great if this was an episode where everything was good? If we just could talk about all the things that we liked and how great it was that there really are no bad versions of Sense and Sensibility. And then we got like 5 minutes into this one.
And we like, oh
no. Because this is 7 half-hour episodes. It was a fucking slog.
It was dreary. It was dreary because it wasn't bad enough to like hate watch, but it wasn't good enough to be interesting.
Yeah, like it's the kind of bad where I actually feel bad talking about the things in it that I don't think worked, because clearly everyone showed up to do a good job.
Everyone tried their best.
They really did, and there's some fine performances in it. I can't really point at anyone as being particularly bad. They're all fine. Like Mrs. Jennings is a perfect example. Like, she's there.
Yeah, she's fine.
She's okay.
But what a come down after that Patricia Rutledge performance. Like we watched this immediately after, like the next day.
Yeah.
So the contrast was stark to say the least.
Like the best way I can describe it is, so the way every single episode it opens.
I was gonna say there's one thing that really embodies how we felt about this, and I'd like to have you describe it now, please. And that is exactly where you went.
Like everything I talked about the book and the tone and the fact that it's actually funny and it's satirical, all that kind of stuff. And it's very joyful and it's very alive, and you really get to know the characters, and they have personalities and everything like that. They decided that the way every single episode was going to open would be this kind of iris, this vignette around a scene of Eleanor and Marianne sitting side saddle on a sad seesaw, staring at each other in profile.
A slow, sad seesaw.
A slow, sad seesaw with these two sisters sitting side saddle, just staring at each other dramatically and very stoically. And it's like awful to look at, really boring, and also
awful to look at.
Just is completely out of step with the tone of the piece.
Yeah.
Like it's completely wrong. And that speaks to the entire thing. They took Sense and Sensibility so seriously. And I don't mean they over-dramatized it. Like, it doesn't really have any drama in it. It's not super dramatic, but it's also not funny. So it ends up being kind of nothing.
Yeah.
Like there's no point of view.
Yeah.
There's no point of view whatsoever. It's just, let's check off and make sure that everything's in it. And I don't think the actors got much direction because I didn't give a shit about any of the characters. Yeah.
Yeah, I hate to have this episode turn into Ariel just reads her notes out loud for an hour and a half, but like I feel like I have a few notes that really exemplify what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I
do have one good thing. Maybe it'll come up in your notes, but there's one good thing.
I wrote, what is the appeal of Edward other than boring?
Which is funny because I didn't mind the actor.
I wrote, just two boring people.
They're both very boring, but I will say Edward Ferrars is played by an actor named Bosco Hogan.
That's a great name.
Two things: one, great name; two, he was in he was in one of the Draculas we watched.
Oh, good.
He was that was the only good thing about him in this, was that I liked him in another thing.
Yeah. And then I wrote, I have more notes, but these are the ones that I'm just picking out to exemplify sort of your point there. I wrote, Eleanor might not be very good at acting.
She's okay.
She's okay.
I don't think she got direction.
No, I actually thought Marianne wasn't too bad in this. I actually didn't hate her performance. She seemed like the right age. Like she seemed very young. And so like when she was being like a really dramatic teenager, it seemed to fit because I think the actress was genuinely like very young.
Well, I have this to say, and I have this to say very specifically about my experience, what I remember of like what she looked like and how she acted and everything. Nothing.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I genuinely don't remember Marianne.
Yeah.
I know we just watched this a few days ago. I don't remember her.
It's kind of like remember when we did Romeo and Juliet and the BBC Romeo and Juliet, like the actress was only like 15.
Yeah.
But her performance was fine for a 15-year-old, and we really admired like sort of her fortitude for carrying that large of a role, but it still wasn't. She was certainly believable as a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
You could absolutely say that for her. That's kind of how I felt about this Marianne. Like, by golly, she was believable as a teenager.
No, I do remember her.
Yeah.
I remember her. No, this is the thing I remember. This drove me fucking crazy. Marianne delivers every single line in every single episode of this 7-episode miniseries in a very intense whisper. Everything is done with this very breathy. It's awful. It's absolutely awful because she only has one level throughout the entire thing. She never gets loud. She never gets quiet. It's always this one weird thing that's like between a whisper and between normal voice.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
Yeah, I think she wasn't directed to find levels. I always tell my actors, you got to find some levels.
Just speak clearly.
Yeah.
I hated it. I hated it.
But you did like one character.
Incorrect.
You liked more than one character?
No, I loved one character.
I wrote Jeremy Hart's this character.
Peter Woodward is the actor that plays Willoughby in this version. I'm going to go ahead and say something right here. Best Willoughby. Best Willoughby of anyone that we watched.
I can't agree.
I know you can't. I know you can't.
Agree.
That's totally fine.
My heart will not allow me to agree.
I completely understand. I'm just saying, based on what is on the page and based on what I got out of the book reading it and the version of the story in my head, this Willoughby matched up perfectly with that.
I see.
He was young and vibrant and dashing and full of life in a way that no other version was, even if another version was very handsome and very charming.
Very sexy.
I want to be really clear. It's not like I think there's only one good one.
I understand.
I think he was the best and just edged out one or two other people.
I understand.
But he's dreamy and blonde curls. Like he's so fucking good. Only good thing. Not only the only good thing in this, he's the only great thing in this.
Yeah. I had one other note as well, and that was about the costumes. And I know I harp on this sometimes, but like
I'm not laughing about you harping on it. I'm laughing at the costumes.
Yeah. I just as I have over the 3 years we've been doing this podcast, I actually have learned a little more about historical costuming. Like I watch several YouTube channels about it, and I find it very fascinating. But it's the kind of thing where like once you see something, you can't unsee it. And that's how I feel about wearing historical garments over non-historical undergarments. It does not give you the right shape. You will look sloppy. You will not look right. Something doesn't look right if you're wearing a modern bra under a 19th century, like early 19th century dress or whatever. So first of all, at one point I literally could see the outline of Marianne's bra through her costume. So that's no good. You should not be able to see the outline of the actress's bra. Second of all, Marianne had this like gray sack with a lace collar that she wore constantly. And I said to you, like, I can only imagine like this, like, I think she genuinely was very young. This like 16, 17-year-old actor going like, I can't believe it. I got the job. I'm going to play Marianne Dashwood in Sense and Sensibility. Like, such a great role and such a great part. And like, she's the young, beautiful sister. I bet I'm going to be given so many beautiful costumes to wear and then be handed this gray sack and think, Jesus Christ.
Was this the one where she's like, her clothes never fit?
Yeah, her clothes never fit. She has this gray sack that she wears that you can see the outline of her bra, which is really unfortunate. And then there was this one yellow dress that she wore that was pretty, except when she turned around, you could see how badly the bodice fit her. Like it was buttoned in the back and the buttons had these huge gaps between them. And she's like a tiny girl, so I can't imagine what size person this bodice was made for, but it was not made for her. It was just like so gapped and so stretched in the back, and like she just had her back to the camera for an entire scene, and it was very noticeable.
Unfortunately,
the costumes, just like the fit was poor on all the costumes, but that's the best example I have. I wrote Marianne's dress is so ugly. I think I was talking about the gray dress. And there are a couple dresses in this that I found screenshots of the 1995 Pride and Prejudice that show up again. I think Marianne at one point wears a dress that I showed you that Kitty wears in the 95 Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
So anyway, like I said, there is genuinely one big BBC costume closet somewhere, and it would be fun to go and find all these clothes.
Anyway.
Yeah, phoning it in. Your basic, reasonably serviceable 1980s BBC Jane Austen miniseries.
Yeah, I guess like the catty thing I always think of, just like the shit. If you want to be shitty about something that you didn't like, you say, you know what my favorite part was? The end. Because now I don't have to watch it anymore. I can't even say that about this one. Because do you remember how bad the ending was?
Was it the sad seesaw all over again?
No, it just got cut off in like the middle of a scene.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they ran out of time.
Yeah.
It's like they rushed everything in the last 2 seconds. And it's literally as if the characters are like, well, and now let's go to the next scene where we're going to explain more of the thing we're talking about.
And it just ends.
But then the credits run. Like you literally, I know you were super confused because you were like, is that the last episode?
Yeah.
That can't be the last episode.
I know, I got really angry. I was like, surely this is wrong. It's a cliffhanger. And you're like, no, it's over.
It's just the end. It was dumb. Yeah. Also, Margaret does not appear.
No Margaret. Ghost Margaret.
Yeah. Does 1971 and 1981. And then we get to 1995 and a very good movie.
Here's what would have been great about being a Jane Austen fan in the early 90s. Say it's 1993, 1994, and you're a Jane Austen fan, and you turn to your friend and you say, I just really wish that they made some really good Jane Austen adaptation. I'd love to see like a wonderful mini series of Pride and Prejudice. And you know what? I would love to see a wonderful theatrical release of Sense and Sensibility. That's what I want. Of course, that's a pipe dream. That's never going to happen. What I have, I suppose, is perfectly adequate. These BBC miniseries from the early 80s. Maybe the BBC will make another miniseries again someday. But of course, nothing could possibly be released next year that would fulfill all of my Jane Austen needs.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In this scenario, is the friend you're talking to, did they go, I really like Persuasion?
Maybe. They might.
Because there was one of those too.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But no, anyway, sorry. You clearly have a point in your hypothetical.
My point is that if you're a Jane Austen fan in 1995, you get both the Colin Firth, Jennifer Ely Pride and Prejudice and the Emma Thompson Sense and Sensibility in the same year.
And Persuasion.
And Persuasion. You never forget Persuasion.
The one everyone talks about.
We're going to do Persuasion someday. I've never actually read it. I know the plot, basically. But I've never actually read it. And that just kind of blows my mind. That's just kind of cool. That like the world kind of converged. It's funny because I don't I could be wrong. I don't think there's any cast crossover between the two productions, which I guess makes sense because they were probably shooting around the same time. Like, the movie probably shot earlier than the TV series, but like I know the TV series had a really long production period. Anyway, we're not talking about Pride and Prejudice. I'm just saying.
No, we've only mentioned it 20 times.
I'm just saying 1995 was a good year for Jane Austen.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think that really gets to it because, like, let's just call it out. This is a really, 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 let me check my notes. Hang on. I got 3 more. Really, really, really good movie.
Yeah.
Like, this is a great movie.
It's great. So this is written, screenplay by Emma Thompson, who won the Oscar for it, I do believe.
She's still, I believe, to this day, the only person who has won Oscars for both acting and screenwriting.
It's very interesting.
And if Matt Damon and Ben Affleck ever decide they want to start winning acting Oscars,
if Dan Futterman wants to win acting Oscars, he's won screenwriting Oscars.
He has.
Yeah.
I
just thought it was funny. I like saying Dan Futterman.
I don't think anyone's going to win who wasn't an actor first.
Yeah, that's fair.
Or at least someone who wasn't already like super well known for acting.
Do you want to just kind of go through the cast? Is that a good place to start?
No,
do you want to dig in?
I want to start with the producer and the director.
Okay, go ahead.
Because this whole thing started, like you mentioned, this person in 1993 or 94 was like, I want Jane Austen stuff. Well, if that person knew that in 1989, producer Lindsay Doran first started working on an adaptation of Sense and Sensibility, they might have gotten their hopes up, like more than they thought they deserved to. But Lindsay Doran has worked on a number of different things. She had wanted to do it for a long time. She loves Sense and Sensibility. And this is a quote that I think is very telling, and it goes directly to the stuff we've already talked about. She was looking for a writer who was, quote, equally strong in the areas of satire and romance. She understood that the book is not just romantic, it is funny. She met Emma Thompson when she was producing Dead Again, which Kenneth Branagh was directing.
Yes, her now ex-husband.
Yeah, which, if anyone hasn't seen it, is a really good movie. Immediately after they shot it, she pitched Emma Thompson on Sense and Sensibility. And Emma Thompson basically spent like 4 years writing it.
Yeah.
And grew as a writer. Like she wanted her to write it because she'd done like comedy sketches.
Yeah.
And she was like, you get the comedy of it. And I think you're a good and smart person. I think you should write Sense and Sensibility.
Yeah.
And Emma Thompson said, I mean, sure. And the rest is history.
Yeah. Can I talk about some very, very important production history, which is definitely not just gossip about Emma Thompson's personal life?
Do you want to talk about it now, or do you want to talk about when we get to Willoughby?
No, I want to talk about it now.
Okay, go for it.
So in 1995, something that you should know about Emma Thompson is that she was in the middle of a public divorce from Kenneth Branagh because he had cheated on her with Helena Bonham Carter, and she was low. She was in a low spot.
I just want to give anyone a chance. If you need a really quick wait, what? Take your wait, what? And now let's continue.
Why anyone would be unfaithful to the most beautiful, most wonderful, funniest, coolest woman in the world, I cannot imagine. Kenneth Branagh, maybe not a good person.
Well, the funny thing is Tim Burton also cheated on his wife with Helena Bonham Carter, which is my understanding.
Right?
I think.
Like,
I'm going to walk that back just a little bit.
Is she his second wife?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Because they're married now.
I mean, maybe Helena Bonham Carter's not a good person. I have no basis. I have no grounds. I have no grounds
clue
for that accusation.
Like, we're not making wild assumptions about artistic choices. We're making wild assumptions about people's lives. So like maybe we should dial it back a little bit.
But anyway, it is a matter of public record that she was in the middle of a divorce from Kenneth Branagh, who, famous like British acting power couple at the time. She was the writer and star of this movie. We're going to talk about who directed it in a minute. She came on set and she found that cast as Willoughby was a tall, dark and handsome drink of water named Greg Wise. And she looked at him and she said, "That one, please." And he looked at her and he said, "Yes, I will. Thank you." They have been married for 25 years. They have 2 children. And they are both amazing. She met her husband on the set of Sense and Sensibility. In the few scenes that they have together on camera, they have chemistry, even though they are not an on-screen couple. Side note, Emma's sister, Sophie Thompson, also met her husband on the set of Sense and Sensibility. Emma looked at this beautiful man, this dashing hero with his dark hair and beautiful eyes, and said, "I will cut myself off a slice of that," while her sister Sophie looked at the goofy, punchable, buck-toothed guy that they, certainly a very nice man, that they cast as stupid Robert Ferrers and said, that's the one for me. They got married. They're still married. They have children.
It's wonderful.
It's just wonderful.
It just adds a layer to these kind of things. That stuff like that shouldn't make it more interesting, but like, of course it makes it more interesting.
Yes.
Of course it does.
Yes, I love it.
And I don't think you are blowing smoke when you say that there's chemistry on screen.
There's one scene in particular where Willoughby is like visiting them at their cottage and they're all kind of sitting outside in the grass having a little picnic, and he's like just kind of goofing around, and he kind of like crawls towards Eleanor. Emma plays Eleanor, in case that wasn't clear. And like they have this moment of eye contact that just like sizzles. It's amazing. And you know, when you know they're a real life couple, it makes sense.
It's really nice.
It's very nice. They seem to be, I watched a few interviews with the two of them and they seem like extremely nice people.
I've been working harder and harder in the last few years to not engage in any kind of hero worship. I really don't want to put people I don't know up on a pedestal. I'm tired of saying the words like, I love this person, and then find out that they're human and they have flaws. And sometimes those flaws are things that make me not love them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably much healthier for me to say, I really like that person's work and they seem cool, and like kind of leave it there. It's hard for me to do that with Emma Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
She's just the best.
She's perfect.
She's perfect. And I've said this on the show before too.
Yes.
We've talked about this. She's amazing.
Yes.
Can I talk about who directed this movie?
Yes, please do. Can I give you a hint?
Yeah.
Who directed it?
Yeah.
He likes sheep.
He
loves
he does.
sheep.
He does.
Loves them.
He also likes emotional honesty. He's fucking great. Every time we watch something of it, like it's so good. Ang Lee directed this,
Mm-hmm.
which was not a choice that people were expecting, because this was his first Western movie. He's from Taiwan. He had directed like 3 movies up until this point, and the one that got their interest was something he did called The Wedding Banquet, which was about family relationships and social comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And he was funny, and that was one of the things that Lindsay Doran was drawn to. And he needed convincing, and he came to England and spent months kind of learning how he's going to make a movie in the West. And I hear lots of there's tons of fun behind the scenes anecdotes about like the things he made the crew go through and how he made them meditate, and also he didn't really understand that he was supposed to be nice to all of the actors, because that's how things work in the Hollywood system now, in the stars in the current star system. But he did something amazing, and I don't want to turn this into a conversation about all of the choices that he seemed to make as a director. I want to just boil it down to one thing. And if you have anything you want to say,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I'd love to hear it. One of the things that has come up on this show before is I really appreciate a director who is both insightful and confident,
Mm-hmm.
because it leads to movies that are so good and so rewarding and so easy to watch, because they're not constantly drawing your attention to tricks that they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
I won't mention other ones. There's a bunch that I've mentioned before, but there's so many movies where you like the director is the star of the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and they just want you to see, I made this choice and I made this choice and I made this choice, and then I had the camera do this thing, and aren't I great? Aren't I smart? And I feel like he's just sitting there going like, no, whatever makes the most sense for the story, that's the thing I'm going to do, but I don't want the camera to just sit there.
Yeah.
And he worked with the actors so beautifully, and he did such a fucking fantastic job, and I have a lot of respect for him. I have a growing amount of respect for Ang Lee every year that goes by.
That's great. I do too. Also, all of his movies have sheep in them.
Hulk might not.
It might.
I'm not sure.
I think it might. We'll have to go back and check.
I do want to watch Hulk again. I'm the person that likes Hulk.
Yeah.
Maybe someone else does. If anyone else on the show likes Hulk, tell us.
Great. Can we go through the cast?
Yes, please.
All right. As the Dashwood family, we have the aforementioned Emma Thompson as Eleanor Dashwood.
And who plays the other 2 members of the Dashwood family?
The other 3, you mean?
What?
Because Margaret is alive and well. We have Kate Winslet, some unknown named Kate Winslet. Actually, she wasn't unknown at this time.
Kate Winslet in 1995?
Yeah.
It was like this and Heavenly Creatures.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, she was really young.
Yeah.
I think she was still a teenager, or very early 20s.
I think so.
Yeah. She plays Marianne. I think I just love the 2 of them. They feel like sisters. I know that Emma Thompson is not 19. I do not care. This is the exception that proves the rule.
Well, I guess when they were making it, they changed her age to 27.
Yeah.
Like they decided she is a spinster. She's 27.
Yeah. which is fine.
Even though she was still like 35.
She was like 35.
But it's okay. Like that's
it's okay. It's okay. She looks great.
35 is a movie 27.
She looks great. She looks great. And their mom is played by Gemma Jones, who I think they had to age up Mrs. Dashwood a little bit in order to accommodate Emma Thompson's, age, which is, again, fine. I know this is usually the kind of thing that I don't care for, but I will not speak ill of Emma Thompson in any way. She's perfect for this role.
Mm-hmm. And Gemma Jones went from playing the mom in Sense and Sensibility to playing the mom in Bridget Jones' Diary.
Yeah.
Which is not Pride and Prejudice, but it's like close to Pride and Prejudice.
It's close enough.
Yeah.
And then there is a Margaret. What is this actress's name?
This actress's name is Emily Francoise.
Emily Francoise, who didn't do a lot of other movies afterwards, and I found out why. So she's a child actor, obviously. She went to Oxford, converted to Islam, and became a commentator for Al Jazeera. So she is a political journalist for the Middle East, which is very neat.
My only two notes about it is that Margaret is a real character and Emily's life got real interesting.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, but she's a real character. No, I actually do want to dig into this for a second. She's in so many scenes and so much plot hinges on her involvement.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's an overstatement. She's there. She's a real character. She has real dimensions. She's not just a byproduct.
Well,
I feel like she got as much attention in the writing as everyone did.
Yeah, I mean, they give her interests. Like, she loves geography. And remember, there's the whole plot with the atlas. Like, that's not from the book.
No.
That she loves this atlas, and Edward sends it to her after they have to move and leave her atlas behind. There's the whole thing at the beginning that, like, she's in hiding and won't come out and they can't find her, and Edward is the one that like ends up tracking her down and like kind of winning her affections. And Eleanor has a reason to like Edward right from the beginning because she sees him being nice to her baby sister. Like, that's all she wants, is to see poor Margaret like smiling and sword fighting, like the part where they're sword fighting out on the lawn and like she stops to wave and he stops to wave and then she stabs him in the stomach. It's so funny. She's just great. She's like a very tomboyish little Margaret, but very very sweet. Being a tomboy is great. I don't mean to I don't know what I'm saying, like, oh well, despite her tomboyishness, I guess she's fine. No, she's very sweet. She's a great character.
I really I think I want to spend the most amount of time talking about the first 20 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
Because I have a number of questions and a number of things that I want to bring up. Like, first of all, the first 20 minutes of this movie is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, as you say, like almost invented from whole cloth. Like, so much of this stuff does not happen in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So much of the way that Eleanor and Edward's relationship progresses, so much of the way that it starts, his introduction, like that stuff is not in the book.
Yeah.
And it's fucking brilliant that they spend so much time on it.
Yeah. And we did not mention that Edward is perfectly cast.
Yeah.
Edward is Hugh Grant, of course.
I have some questions for you, actually.
Yes.
Because we haven't really gotten much into Edward as a character up until now.
Yeah.
I have come to understand that there is not a small number of people who are not Edward fans.
Yeah.
The character himself.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people feel like he doesn't deserve Eleanor.
Yeah.
Because he is just kind of nothing.
Yeah.
And kind of milquetoast.
Yeah.
What are your, like, first of all, do you think Edward is a compelling and sympathetic character?
I think he's a sympathetic character.
You don't find him that compelling?
No, I don't. Edward is like the guy that your friend sees something in. So you're like, well, he seems like a nice guy. I really think she could do better. She's so smart and brilliant and great. But like, they seem happy, so it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
so I guess my next question is, like, do we want Eleanor to end up with him?
I mean, she loves him, so yeah, we want her to be happy.
Well, I think that's really the big thing. We want her to be happy.
Yeah.
She wants him.
Yeah.
Even though we may want her to have someone better.
Right. But there is no one better in the script. It's not like, oh, maybe she should have gone for Colonel Brandon, Like, who else was she going to be with?
I would not be surprised to find, like, Eleanor Brandon shippers
maybe
out there. I don't know. I'm not.
I mean,
personally.
Mrs. Jennings is one, clearly.
Yeah. I want Eleanor to end up with Edward. And I liked Edward on the page. And then I fucking loved him in the movie.
Well, Hugh Grant. He's so perfectly cast.
The thing that I love about this is, like, is Hugh Grant's Edward Ferrars, as written by Emma Thompson and directed by Ang Lee, just a perfect response to the idea of toxic masculinity? Where...
Okay, explain.
Well, so I feel like if you're going to have a love interest for your main character who is a woman,
mm-hmm.
and you're going to make that person a man,
mm-hmm.
there are certain characteristics that person is generally going to have
mm-hmm.
if you want the audience to want her to be with him,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to sell her falling for him in a short amount of time.
Okay.
So some of those things probably are like handsome,
Yeah.
tall.
Yeah.
Usually they need to have a strong personality,
Uh-huh.
and they need to be kind of forceful with their personality,
Uh-huh.
and they need to be smart,
Right.
and they need to be funny.
Uh-huh.
They need to be, I think, kind of like aggressive personalities.
Okay.
And I feel like it's like low-level toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about, because you don't want them to be kind of wishy-washy, and you don't want them to be soft and quiet and gentle and kind soft boys.
You don't want a kind soft boy
No, I don't think you want a kind
as
soft
your
boy.
romantic hero.
Because, like, masculinity is not kind soft boys.
I like a kind soft boy.
No, but that's the thing. I thank you.
I live with a kind soft boy.
I appreciate that.
I live with 2 of them, hopefully.
But like, I love kind soft boys.
Yeah.
I think they are fantastic. And that's one of the reasons why I fucking love Hugh Grant's Edward Ferrars, because he's still a strong person when it counts and when it's about something he's interested in. But the main things that drive him are like compassion and listening. He listens to Eleanor.
Yeah.
Like, he has so much respect for her immediately.
Yeah.
And I love it. I just love it.
Well, he does have compassion. Like we hear that from the very beginning. He's like arguing with his sister Fanny, that total B.
Oh man. And Fanny was Harriet Walter.
Yeah,
who,
Harriet Walter, who's so good.
I'll throw it out. Another actor from Succession, a show everyone should watch.
Yeah. And she's just perfectly evil. They've aged John and Fanny up a little bit too. Again, I think to accommodate Emma Thompson's Eleanor, which again is fine. And instead of a child, Fanny has like a stupid little dog. But Fanny's being like really shitty to the Dashwood sisters, and almost the first thing you hear Edward say is like, Fanny, they've just lost their father. Like, what are you doing? What do you expect from them? And
can I say my favorite thing that happens?
Yeah.
Sorry, please finish.
No,
I'm so
go
sorry.
Ahead. Go ahead.
One of my favorite choices that they make in the writing is Fanny. One of the first things she tells them is, yes, my brother Edward is visiting, and I'm giving him, was it Margaret's room?
Margaret's room.
Yeah, I'm giving him Margaret's room because the view is much nicer.
Yeah.
And Margaret, that's what makes Margaret hide, and they're all mad and everything like that, and Edward shows up and they're going like, you dick, you absolute fucking dick.
How do you like your view?
How do you like your view? And he goes like, oh, it's fine. The stables are great. And Fanny goes like, no, that's not the room I put you in. He says, no, there was clearly a mix-up when I got here. They were putting me in one of the family rooms, which
it was clearly someone's room.
It's someone's room. I'm not going to sleep in someone's room. It's their room. And it's just this perfect piece of unexpected kindness.
Yeah.
And like, that is the moment. That's not the moment that makes Eleanor fall in love with him, but that is the moment that gets her attention.
Well, and also because like, it's just such a perfect moment because it shows that he understands his sister. Like, he knows exactly what happened because he knows that his sister is terrible.
Yeah.
So like, he's not just like, oh, I don't know, there must be some mistake. He's like, oh, yes, I have requested the guest room instead, and that is where I will be staying. Please and thank you.
Yeah. And he's so funny. He's just so funny.
He's great.
So many jokes, and it's just delightful.
When he comes into the room when Lucy Steele is there, and he's like, up. It's great. It's hard to describe.
Peak Hugh Grant.
Yeah.
What is it, like this and Four Weddings and a Funeral?
Well, Four Weddings and a
peak
Funeral
Hugh
was
Grant?
the previous year.
Yeah.
Four Weddings and a Funeral was 94, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So
it reminds me of how like John Cusack made like in a 2-year time period, he made like Grosse Point Blank, Being John Malkovich, and High Fidelity.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's peak John Cusack.
Yeah.
This is peak Hugh Grant.
Yeah. And like, this is it's like the whole cast of Peter's Friends over again because Hugh Laurie and Imelda Staunton play a couple in this. They play the Palmers. I told you before we watched it, and we'd seen it before, but you hadn't read the book at that point. I was like, Hugh Laurie, like, I know it's a small part. Mr. Palmer ended up, for whatever reason, throughout this whole process, being one of my favorite characters. And I was like, I've never seen a better performance in such a small role as Hugh Laurie playing Mr. Palmer. Mm-hmm. He's like so shitty, but so funny at the beginning, and then so nice to them. Like the little scene where Eleanor knocks on the door in the middle of the night because she needs to send him for the doctor. He just has this moment of like, okay, here I go. Yes, of course. But just this like you know when like someone is asking you to do something and you really don't want to do it for many reasons, but you know of course you have to do it because you can't not do it. And it was just like this moment of like, I just need a second. Okay, yes, of course I will go for the doctor.
Like, it's that moment where you remind yourself, not only would not doing it be wrong, arguing with the person
Right.
at all would also be wrong.
Right.
So not only am I doing it, I am doing it willingly.
Yes.
It's good.
Yeah.
This movie has 2 scenes of people meeting someone at a door when they would rather be doing something else.
In the middle of the night.
Yeah.
You loved that little scene. Do you want to describe it?
So many beautiful touches in this movie. They don't waste a single second in this movie. But yeah, there's like the running plot through all of them that when Marianne and Eleanor are in London with Mrs. Jennings, that Marianne is constantly writing letters, as you were talking about. She's constantly writing letters to Willoughby and constantly asking if letters have come in for her, which of course they don't. And I feel like sometimes the like main servant that she asks, his reaction is usually like, I'm sorry, no, nothing. This one, he's like real annoyed with her.
He's a full character.
It's beautiful. He has a real inner life to him, and she's constantly calling him to like take letters. And there's just one where he has shown up. It is the middle of the night. He does not want to be there, but he works for these people.
His wig is on sideways.
It's amazing, and he's just like, he just has his hand out ready to take the letter that he knows she's gonna give him. It's like the most perfect 5 seconds of the entire movie. It's so good.
It's good.
Can I just say too, like there are so many scenes in this movie that are so short. Like we're talking less than 30 seconds, less than 10 seconds sometimes. There isn't this obsession with everything needs to be a long scene and then we move to the next long scene. It's just they really use every single little moment they can to drive the story forward. It really is a movie that doesn't waste time, but never makes you feel like it's rushing things.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
On another note, what did you think of Colonel Brandon?
Colonel Brandon's fucking amazing. Has anyone ever invented a Harry Potter like Hogwarts faculty drinking game?
Yeah.
Like
Every time one pops up in any movie, you just take a drink.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, you'd be very drunk by the end of this movie. There's at least 3 that I can think of right off the top of my head.
Well, hang on. Who do we have? We have Emma Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
We have Alan Rickman,
Yep.
who's Colonel Brandon,
Yep.
Imelda Staunton.
Yep,
She's not faculty.
No,
but
she's like I don't know what she is. She's like, doesn't she work for like the Ministry of something?
the Ministry of Magic, I
Yeah.
think. But also Robert Hardy is Sir John Middleton. He also is like the head of the Ministry of Magic. Again, I think. I don't know Harry Potter as well as other stuff.
Was Elizabeth Spriggs ever in a Harry Potter movie? I feel like she might have been.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
It didn't pop up.
She might have died before then. I think she died pretty shortly after this.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
She plays Mrs. Jennings.
Yeah. But yeah, lots of people show up in Harry Potter. Alan Rickman,
R.I.P.
I loved him as Colonel Brandon.
Yeah.
I loved him as much as I've loved him in anything.
Yeah.
Have you ever not loved Alan Rickman in anything?
No, there are like not very many people who have passed away in the last like couple years that anytime I think about them, I am so sad. And
Yeah.
one of them is Robin Williams and one of them is Alan Rickman. Ugh, I just miss him. Maybe it's better he didn't live to see 2020. Maybe it's better anyone that died up to this day. Maybe we can all comfort themselves that they did not live to see 2020.
You are going to a dark place.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to pull you back
Okay.
a little bit. Let's talk about Robert Hardy as Sir John Middleton and Elizabeth Spriggs as Mrs. Jennings.
Great.
Who have the makers of this movie killed?
Well, I love this. Emma Thompson is not afraid to kill off characters. I'm glad you reminded me because it was... she kept Margaret because Margaret was important to her. You know who was not important to her at all? Lady Middleton. Lady Middleton is dead. There's this one like throwaway line about when they're talking about Sir John and they're like, yeah, he's a widower and he lives with his mother-in-law. Great. We've established the relationship. Lady Middleton is nothing. The whole point of her character is that she's nothing and we needed to make a 2-hour movie. So she is not there.
Mm-hmm. I fucking loved the 2 of them.
Yeah, they were great.
I thought they were great. I don't think either of them rise to the heights that Patricia Rutledge did in 1971.
No one could.
But holy shit, they're so much fun. And the scenes they're so intense because they have like 5 dogs that are crazy.
Yeah.
They're like a tornado. They
Yeah.
are a tornado of characters sweeping through every single scene they're in together.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and she's so funny when she's like comforting Marianne and she's like, anything she wants, anything you want, like you're gonna have. Would she like some olives? And Emma Thompson's like, I do not know. I cannot tell you if she wants olives at this moment when she's lying crying on the bed.
This movie is so fucking funny. The scene where what it was, I can't remember what the circumstances are, but basically everyone's sad. And what Eleanor has kind of walked everyone into the house. Marianne has immediately gone to her room to cry. The mom has gone to her room to cry.
Yeah.
And Margaret has gone to her room to cry because
they won't let her in.
Because Marianne won't talk to her.
Yeah.
And Eleanor is just left by herself drinking the cup of tea she made for Marianne that Marianne won't take.
Yes.
And it's the funniest fucking scene in the entire movie.
It's really funny.
But also this movie, like, I felt things. It's very emotionally honest and emotionally raw.
Yeah.
And also funny.
Yes.
It does it so perfectly.
It's so funny.
I could point at so many little choices that they make.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't even really talked about Willoughby. Like, Greg Wise is great. Like, there's a reason Emma Thompson fell madly in love with him in this movie as an actual person and has been married to him for 25 years.
Like when I said before that the guy from the 81 Sense and Sensibility was the best Willoughby.
Yeah.
Like, he edged out Greg Wise, in my personal view, by only a little.
Yeah.
Greg Wise is incredible.
Yeah.
He's so good.
Yeah.
He's a little old. That was my only thing about him.
But he's of the right age for Emma Thompson.
No,
I mean,
but
actually,
he's not the right age for Marianne.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I was so invested in them. You're right.
I can't even talk to you.
I was so invested in their relationship. Actually, he was kind of a toy boy for her because he's, I think, 7 or 8 years younger than her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think one of the good decisions that are made, not only in 81, but also in the 2008 miniseries, is I think the ages of Willoughby are like perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's I completely understand who this character is and why Marianne would see this person as a really good match and not see Brandon as a good match.
Yeah.
And the thing that works here is that, yes, Willoughby, I think, is older than he should be, even though it works just fine.
Yes.
But he also plays as much younger than Alan Rickman.
Yes.
Who is just,
was old the day he was born.
So good.
Yeah.
Like so many actors sprinted to 40 and stayed there until the day they died.
Well, he didn't even start acting until he was like 35. So like we don't even know what he looked like as a younger man.
Yeah. He's really good. Do you want to talk at all about like the backstory? Because here's one thing that I was kind of looking forward to, because I'd seen this, we'd watched this together a number of years ago, but I had kind of forgotten about it. Like so many things we do for the show, I talk so much about how important context is.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this movie before. I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it this time.
Yeah.
Because I had the context of reading the book and watching 3 other adaptations.
Yeah.
And now I see not only what makes it good, but what makes it great.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was really looking forward to was this idea of when Brandon tells Eleanor the story of of his ward and what happened, were we going to see it? Because I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the mark of better visual storytelling, is you show things instead of telling things. But they didn't show it.
And it was fine.
And it was totally fine. Do you agree that it was just fine?
It's just fine.
Like Alan Rickman sold it.
Yeah.
And also it didn't take very long.
Yeah.
And I guess if you're not going to do it, at least do it that way. Like the thing that would have made it interminable was like making it take a really long time.
Yeah.
And also delivered by someone who wasn't Alan Rickman.
Yeah. Yes. Because we do actually see it in 2008. We do see the ward being seduced.
A bit of it.
Right.
Yeah,
Remember
yeah.
at the beginning?
But not in the context of him talking about it.
No. Just like in the context of like, we got to get some sex in here somewhere.
Yeah. I don't want to move on. I love this movie.
No, we have to move on. It's so good. It's so good.
I want to do 2 things.
Okay.
I want to talk about 3 different things really quickly. Here's the deal. I don't want to do a Sense and Sensibility revisited, so I have a few things I want to say. I want to get them out now so I don't regret it later, and then we need to do a second episode.
Great.
I want to go back to those first 20 minutes, and I want to talk about, I think, the best scene in the movie in terms of the power of the writing and how intelligent it was.
Okay.
The scene where Fanny is talking to Mrs. Dashwood about Edward's prospects while Edward is walking down the lane in view of them with Eleanor.
Yes.
It is my favorite scene in the entire movie.
Yeah.
And that is despite the fact that it has really like kind of egregious ADR, which normally sets me against something, but it still works because that scene is doing so many different things. It's exposition. It's Fanny telling the audience all kinds of information about Edward and the problems that exist between Edward and Eleanor being together. It's exposition. It's not her just telling Mrs. Dashwood. She's telling the audience.
Yes.
But it's also fantastic subtext because at no point does she say to Mrs. Dashwood, Edward cannot marry your daughter.
Yes.
That can't happen.
Yes.
And of course, that's subtext that's in the book.
Right.
Like, I understand that. But they kept it and they really like held on to it and they made it so good.
Right.
But it's also fantastic visual storytelling because you didn't even need Edward and Eleanor to be in that scene. The dialogue could easily have just been Fanny and Mrs. Dashwood talking in a room separately.
Mm-hmm.
But because they're also looking at Edward and Eleanor, we get to see a physical version of their relationship where like her shawl falls down and he picks it up and they're clearly joking.
Yeah.
Like, and we don't get to hear anything that they're saying.
Right.
It's just, it is a perfect combination of good dialogue, fantastic subtext, visual storytelling. It's just like a fucking masterclass.
Yeah.
It's such a good scene.
And then the part where Mrs. Dashwood is like, Mrs. Dashwood ends the scene by just saying, I understand you perfectly. And then we cut to her saying like, we need to leave this house right now.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's so good.
That is so good. Second thing, this is a small thing. It made so much sense to get rid of this. Mrs. Jennings, she never does the whole thing about like that Eleanor should be into Brandon.
No.
And she thinks they're going to be together.
No.
Because it's not important.
It's not important. I'm not even sure she does that. Like, there's so much in the book about it. There is such a long section of the book where Mrs. Jennings is convinced that Eleanor and Brandon are engaged. Like, not just like each other, but are actually engaged. I forgot how much of that was in the book. And I'm not sure many of the versions that we watched really touched on it. Because, as you say, it is not important. It is not important.
No, not at all. The last thing I have to say, I want to do this quickly, but it's about the end of the movie.
Okay.
If you told me, if I'd only ever read the book, and you tried to tell me one of the really cool things that Jane Austen does is because, of course, Eleanor is sense and Marianne is sensibility, but they switch at the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Thematically, she switches them because now Marianne is more mature. She's found this maturity. She's found this sense, and she's going for someone who actually makes sense for her. Whereas Eleanor is like, no, I am going to follow my emotions, and I am going to marry Edward.
With no money.
With no money, because that's the thing I should do. My response would be, that's interesting. I don't know how sold on that I am.
Mm-hmm.
It does seem like they just kind of found their husbands, and I don't think that's drawn very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
In the movie, it is so clear to me that Sense and Sensibility switch. Marianne is drawn as so sensible at the end in a really good and very clear way.
Yeah.
But also, I love the fact that when Eleanor cries after Edward says, like,
he's not married.
I'm not married. In the book, she leaves the room and cries.
Yeah.
And here they made the perfect decision to have her cry in front of him.
Yeah.
Because she is okay with showing that. Like, she's not excited about showing that kind of emotion to someone.
But yeah, the walls have finally broken down.
Yeah. I love, apparently Ang Lee gave her direction in that scene. Like, you need to cry. Like, do it. She had to convince Hugh Grant that the scene would work.
Yeah.
And Ang Lee had to convince Emma Thompson how to do it. He was basically like, you're basically going to feel as an actor the need to let the camera see your face. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And the camera never sees her face when she's crying that much. And it works perfectly.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
And it's also like a little bit funny because like she cries like a normal person cries, like, and they're trying to get a hold of themselves.
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of snorting, and it's just this amazing explosion of emotion from someone who up to that point has been very unemotional. So like, I think that's what we would call an
Outwardly.
Right. Exactly. I mean, that's the whole point, right? She can't show what she's feeling. So I really think that's what we would call an earned moment. You know what I mean? Like there's some levels happening.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That was all the stuff I wanted to say. I
No, that's
fucking
great.
loved this movie.
No,
it's so good.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, so good is this movie that like watching it back to back, because we basically watched them on consecutive nights. We watched this and then we moved on to the 2008 miniseries, something that I had seen before and enjoyed very much and liked and thought was good. And I still do think it is good. But it really did the 2008 miniseries a disservice to be watched by someone who had just watched the 1995 Sense and Sensibility the night before, because you just can't help but compare, which is probably unfair. But it made it pale in comparison a little bit.
I mean, I think that's the big, I guess we're moving on.
Yeah, I guess we're moving on.
Like, I think that was my big problem with 2008 because I didn't have prior experience with it. I didn't really get to experience it like on its own.
Yeah.
Now I have too much context. And there was stuff in it that I liked, and I want to talk about that stuff, but I will just say I didn't love it.
Yeah.
I didn't care for it.
Well, I think we had almost the exact same problem as we had watching the more modern Howard's End miniseries after seeing Howard's End with Emma Thompson.
Absolutely.
Like, it was basically exactly the same. Like, no, this is very good. This is fine. It is a good, solid miniseries. Nothing about it is too terrible. Maybe there are one or two things that are really not very good, but for the most part, it's like a solid B. But we just watched Emma Thompson do this exact same thing, so it seems like nothing at all.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I
Yeah.
can definitely agree with that. Like this one, I loved the movie.
Mm-hmm.
This miniseries, I like I said, I think I'm a little more negative on it, but like just like Howard's End, like yeah, I liked it. I
Yeah.
liked it, and there's good stuff in it. But like, what's some of the stuff that's that's good about it?
Well, I think the sisters are great. I think they seem
Mhm.
like sisters. All three of them. Margaret lives in this one. I loved Janet McTeer as Mrs. Dashwood.
Yeah.
I loved having, because they cast the sisters more like the ages of the book, they could have a much younger Mrs. Dashwood, because in the book it's such a big deal about how she's like scarcely 40.
Yeah.
And Janet McTeer is really beautiful, and also like very tall. So she's just such a presence on screen. And I thought she was just a very sweet, kind mother, who was also her own person. The part where she was like, "Sometimes, Eleanor, I think you just don't understand how I feel."
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like they've had this argument before.
Mhm.
She was great.
I just want to back up for 1 second, super quick. It was directed by John Alexander, who's done a lot of TV. Nothing of like particular note that I found. It was written by someone named Andrew Davies. I don't know much about this
Yeah,
person.
whatever.
But this is like, okay, so Pride and Prejudice and the Howard's End thing that we watched. Sorry, A Room with a View. I said Howard's End. I meant A Room with a View. I love that I'm gaining a much better understanding of the range of quality of the work that Andrew Davies does.
Yeah.
Because when the only experience I had was Pride and Prejudice, I was like, this guy's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
But now I feel much more strongly that he's a guy who has the capacity to be fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And we can move on from Andrew Davies, but I guess before we do that, I do have one question for you about him. I guess a statement and a question. One, I don't think this is his best work. I thought that the Pride and Prejudice script, it has so much like beautiful subtlety and it handles exposition really well. This one feels much more like an earlier draft than maybe they should have shot with.
It's a little clunkier
Yeah,
for sure.
like,
There's a lot of exposition.
There's definitely that scene that like it just sticks out so much at the very beginning when you first meet the three sisters, and in the span of 3 lines, each of them gets a line wherein they refer to a different sister by their first name.
Yeah.
So that you as an audience know what their names are.
Yeah.
And there's other ways to do that, but he didn't do that.
Yeah. He did do a couple of interesting things that I'd like to mention.
What's that?
First of all, pre-credits, like we have this little pre-credits scene. Like the
Oh,
first thing that
yes.
we see is this young girl being seduced by someone that we later find out is definitely Willoughby. Like this is the Colonel Brandon's ward getting seduced by Willoughby scene. It's never really referred to again, and there's no other like sexy times in the miniseries, but so we have a little like woohoo, what's so sexy right at the beginning. And then the other thing that I thought was really, really interesting right at the beginning was that when John Dashwood is forced to sort of make the promise to take care of the girls and their mother, they're in the room, so they hear him make the promise. So the whole mini series or the whole book, they're aware that he is breaking a promise. And I mean that's certainly not the case in the book, and it's not the case in any other version that we watched. But it certainly explains something about like their relationship to him. This is also the only version where we see little Harry Dashwood, the son of Fanny and John.
He tickled us.
Well, the camera panned, and riding in the carriage with Fanny and John Dashwood is this little fat, redheaded, extremely pale child with glasses. And we both looked at each other and went, "Oh, it's Calvin."
I like a soft boy.
A soft boy. Love a
know?
soft boy. He was always eating, just
Yeah.
like Calvin. Always eating.
No, I think you're right. I think that's probably one of the best decisions he made. I think at the beginning of the whole thing, I decided like, oh, I understand. This is the fuck those guys edition of the story, where like we immediately see Willoughby doing some bad stuff because you know what? fuck that guy.
Yeah.
And Dashwood, like he finds out in private and then he doesn't have to tell them. Like, no, they know that he made this promise and then went back on it because you know what? Fuck that guy.
Fuck that guy.
It's the fuck those guys edition.
Yeah. I was also very impressed by this is silly things I've been impressed by and wrote down. But in many other versions, when Marianne like falls down and Willoughby has to rescue her, she's just basically like walking along a flat path and like takes a little tumble. She is clearly not injured. In this one, she falls off a cliff. She just like goes down. Like she could have been very badly hurt. It's very perilous.
I should back up too. Let's talk about some of the people because that was Andrew Davies. We got a little sidetracked. Hattie Moorhan is Eleanor. Charity Wakefield is Marianne.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Both of them very good. I think this was really good casting.
They don't really resemble each other, but I thought they were believable as sisters.
Mm-hmm. I can see Charity Wakefield as Janet McTeer's daughter.
Yeah,
but I don't know about Hattie Moorhan.
Yeah.
But I really loved her as Eleanor. Like I had no problems with so much of the casting in this.
Oh yeah, I thought the casting was pretty good.
Yeah.
What's his name? Played John Dashwood from League of Gentlemen.
Oh, Mark Gatiss.
Mark Gatiss. Yeah. Oh, and he's in Sherlock. He's
well, he writes Sherlock too.
Right,
and he's
but
Mycroft.
he's Mycroft in Sherlock. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He's a delight. I thought he was really good in this.
Yeah.
I had no beef with any of the casting. I had beef with one piece of casting.
I also did, and I'm curious to see if it's the same person.
Well, we just talked about how perfect Hugh Grant was as Edward Ferrars.
Oh no, this is not who I was going to talk about.
I think Dan Stevens is. I don't think casting is 100% the problem.
No, I think it was direction.
It's writing and direction.
Yeah, because I think Dan Stevens has it in him to be shy and diffident. He just was not.
Like, there's literally a line where they say, you know, he is a little shy and diffident. And I had to write that down because no, he fucking isn't.
So confident.
From minute one, Edward is dashing. He is so dashing. He's everything I was talking about before. And it's so predictable. It's just so predictable for something like this. Like, basically, what they did with this version of Edward is they're not saying to me, how perfect is it that Eleanor finds someone who is perfect for her?
Mm-hmm.
What they're saying is, how much would any woman meet this guy?
Right.
And fall in love with him?
Right. The whole point is that they're both really boring.
Like, they're both boring, awkward people.
Yeah.
And he's not even a little. They tell us he is, and he isn't. I feel like that's a thing that comes up in so many bad adaptations that we watch, where they tell us a thing, and that thing is clearly not true.
Yeah.
And all it takes, what was it in the that really crappy Anne of Green Gables, the one with Martin Sheen, where she says, you know, I look terrible in orange?
Yeah. Or she's like, I can never wear pink, and she's wearing pink.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just like, this is easy stuff. If the script says a thing, either change the thing they say or make your shit match the script.
Yes.
But no, I fucking hated Edward in this.
Yeah.
Because he was nothing. He was just a very handsome, dashing, kind of reserved, like he clearly was feeling his feelings really hard and he felt his honor really hard. And that's why he didn't tell her about Lucy Steele. And it's so dramatic. And then when he finally tells her, it's so beautiful and romantic. But like, I didn't give a shit because I wasn't invested in the two of them being together even a little.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree.
Who were you going to say is miscast?
I didn't like Colonel Brandon. He did nothing for me.
Yeah.
I really didn't like him. He was so dour.
This whole thing was dour.
At one point he came into the room and Eleanor, I think it was Eleanor, just asked him like, well, how's your day going, Colonel? And he just looks at her and goes, what's done is done.
But it wasn't like intentionally funny.
No. It was just so over the top dramatic.
I feel bad because I like David Morrissey in other stuff.
And I feel bad because we're making fun of the things we didn't like. And I actually like this version. Like, I would watch it again. Like, I've seen it before. I like it. I just think I think my mind was poisoned against it, having watched it immediately following the other version.
Well, I'm sure this also wasn't doing you any favors, but you were watching it next to someone who was not enjoying it.
Yeah, that's true. Couple things that did well. This is the only version that we see the duel between Colonel Brandon and Willoughby.
If by doing it well you mean just the inclusion of it.
Just a fun little thing, a fun thing that's in it that we don't see in any other version. There's a duel in this one.
I just thought it was shot so poorly. I hated it. I hated the duel scene. But like you say, like it is a really, really interesting choice to include it.
Well, especially because you were like, well, that's not in the book. I was like, or you were like, is that in the book? And I was like, yeah, it's totally in the book. And you had missed it because it's not
That's
like.
what I talked about. I talked about that before.
Yeah, it's not like they had a duel. It's much more subtle than that.
I just, so many times in this whole thing, I just feel like the filmmaking, I compare this so much to Pride and Prejudice, to the 95 Pride and Prejudice. It's like the anti-Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
Andrew Davies' script is nowhere near as smart and subtle. It's fine. It's still a good script, but it's not as perfect and beautiful as that one was. The other thing was the production and the direction in that one was so fantastic. In this one, it's so dramatic. It is so over dramatic. There's almost nothing funny in this version. There's little things. There's like when Eleanor when she downs.
When she drinks the wine.
Yeah, like that's funny. And there are a couple of funny moments in it, but like overall, this thing is dramatic.
It's dramatic.
The music is exactly the type of music I hate. This is the type of thing where like the music is constantly telling me how to feel rather than supporting the emotions that are happening in the story.
Yeah.
I just thought it was so heavy-handed. And I thought it was really created without a lot of care. And I think the story deserves better than that.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't dislike it. I think we're divided on this because I
definitely
liked
divided.
it. I liked that it included some stuff from the book that I hadn't seen in any other version. Like I mentioned, the duel. The other thing that it included that was not the case for any other version was that the story of Brandon's ward was, I think, essentially the same story as in the book, where she had been essentially married to his older brother against her will, and then she ran away, and then they were in love, but he had to find her, and she was already like destitute, and she had this child. But he was talking about there's a line in the book that I said to you, like, what is Jane Austen referring to? I'm so curious to know like what this would have meant in 1811. And that line is in this version, which Brandon's talking about his brother who's now dead, and talking about how he treated Eliza very, very badly when they were married. And he says his pleasures were not what they ought to have been.
Yeah.
And my question was like, my first thought was like, oh, does he mean he was gay? And you were like, I really don't know that they would have like referred to sex as pleasures like at that time. So maybe like he's referring to alcoholism. I think
gambling or something like that.
I honestly think in the context of this 2008 version, I think they meant like he was gay, like he was into men. But that, again, that's just my interpretation.
But also we saw that in Davies' room with a view.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. So, but again, knowing, to your point earlier, knowing more about Andrew Davies and what he sometimes chooses to highlight, I wonder if that was something that really jumped out to him as well as the screenwriter and was like, oh, this is interesting. I got to get this in here somehow.
Well, another thing that he clearly wanted to get in, I think he brought another piece of Pride and Prejudice to the party because, like, okay, let me ask you, what famously in any version of Pride and Prejudice, what is Darcy's reaction upon seeing Wickham for the first time?
He cuts him, just ignores him.
Right?
Yeah.
Because he knows who this guy is and he knows what he has done. Then the difference in Sense and Sensibility is that when Brandon meets Willoughby for the first time, he doesn't know what he's done.
Right.
Not in this version. In this version, he sees him and he's like, oh,
it's you.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, Andrew, I get it. You're bringing, that's Pride and Prejudice, though.
Yeah.
That's a different story.
That's funny.
You're just doing the same thing over again in a story where that doesn't happen.
Yeah, to be fair, it has been a struggle this whole episode to remember it's Willoughby, not Wickham, because of the W's.
I'm amazed that I got through that in one take.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm really, really proud of myself. No, I want to be really clear about something because I think we do disagree on the general quality of this, but I want to be clear that I'm not saying it's bad. In fact, I probably think we're going to agree when we do the quadrants, honestly.
Gotcha.
But the reason that I'm so frustrated is the reason, and I've said this on the show before, the reason that like a teacher would be more frustrated with someone who's capable of getting an A, phoning it in, than someone who like is only ever going to get a C and that's the best that they do. This has so much going for it and there's so much potential in it that I'm frustrated that I didn't like it more than I did.
Yeah.
That's the thing that frustrated me.
Yeah.
There's so much potential on set every single day. And I feel like a lot of it was not utilized.
Yeah. I mean, just as an example, like This is picky, and I'm always going back to hair and costumes because I'm learning more about it. Like as we do this show, the hair is very modern. Like, Eleanor just has like a yoga bun with heavy bangs the whole time, and they didn't wear their hair like that. Like they didn't wear their hair like they would have worn bangs sometimes, but like short curly bangs, not like a heavy Zooey Deschanel style like dark bang. Like that is not a hairstyle that would have appeared at the time. So it makes things look kind of sloppy, I feel like, when you just get those details wrong. And I think sometimes like producers err on the side of like, we have to make it look a little more modern because otherwise it won't be relatable. But I find it distracting actually if there's this disconnect between like everybody's head from the neck up and what they're wearing on the bottom. And it takes me out of it, and it makes it seem like not period. And then if it seems like it's not period, then why are we doing all of these weird conventions that would have been in 1811, you know?
Yeah. I agree with you, and I actually think you've hit on like maybe the last two things I want to say about this, which is I saw that in the writing. One, something very modern that I saw that I don't think is in the book, and I don't think is in any of the good versions that we watched. This makes it very clear to me, the viewer, that the thing that makes Marianne start to fall in love with Brandon is being saved by him.
Right.
Is that he's carrying her back, and it's very romantic. Very romantic. But like in the 95 version, she's out of it. She didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah.
She didn't know it was Brandon that brought her back. It was Brandon as a person. It was what he was into. It was there. Even in 1971, they had a real intellectual connection.
Yeah.
And that was what made them fall in love. But this one is so simplistic and also goes against what the book is talking about, which is that like who you are as people. That's the thing that makes people fall in love.
Well, and also to your point before, if she falls in love with Brandon because of this romantic gesture that he did, then that's just sensibility again, right? Like your point before was the whole thing is by the time we get to the end of the book, Marianne's relationship with Brandon is based more on sense. And if her relationship with Brandon is just one more like thing of her being very attracted to this romantic hero, then she hasn't grown as a person.
Exactly. But then the other thing I think is even more directly related to what you're talking about. That one was kind of a reach, but this one I think is directly related. It has the scene where Willoughby comes to the house when Marianne is convalescing. One decision that is made is Marianne actually hears him.
Right.
She hears the conversation.
Similar to the beginning where they hear the conversation.
Yeah. But the scene between him and Eleanor felt so much to me like the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, which is that they treated the context of the period as a bug, not a feature.
Right.
Where it was like, well, we have to modernize this. Some of the things that Eleanor says to him in that scene were both very satisfying for me as a person living in 2020, but also very unsatisfying for me as someone who really enjoys a story told in the context of his time.
Yeah.
Because I don't think she, as a person in that time period, would have said those things to him. And I feel like you're either going to ignore the time period and just do whatever a modern person would do, or you're going to try to embrace it and come up with something better.
Yeah.
And I don't think he did. I really didn't like that scene in this version.
Yeah, because in the book, basically, all she says to him is literally all she says to him throughout his entire thing is like, I can't listen to this. This is wrong of me to hear. It is wrong of you to tell me any of this. You should have more respect for your wife than to talk about her like this. Like, this is not endearing you to me at all. And then she has that great line at the end when she says to him, she can never be more lost to you than she is now.
Right.
Which is an amazing line. And she does say that in this, but to your point, like, it gets lost a little bit in all of the other dialogue.
Yeah. And I didn't appreciate it.
Yeah.
I did not like that. I'm sorry. I feel really bad because it is good.
It's a shame to end on a bummer. And I guess I didn't realize we were so far apart on this because I actually really enjoyed it. Like, other than the thing, I think we happened to talk about the things that we didn't like a little more because that was where we had common ground. But like, as a whole, I enjoyed this and would certainly watch it again.
The two things that I loved more than anything in it were Hattie Moorhan and Charity Wakefield.
Yeah, I thought they were really good.
Fantastic. Charity Wakefield was so good in this.
Yeah, she was great.
There's also like sexy Sense and Sensibility. Like, there is that scene between her and Willoughby, when they're by the window when he's brought her to his house.
Where they might kiss.
It was like the equivalent of them boning.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there's some sexual tension in it, and like we could have a conversation about whether that's appropriate in a story like this, but like at the end of the day, it's there and it was effective. I liked stuff about it. It's this movie was capable of so much more, and it didn't deliver on that for me, and that makes me very, very frustrated.
Yes.
More so than something that didn't have that potential in the first place.
I hear and agree with your larger point.
Would you like to do some quadrants and tie this whole thing up?
Let's do it.
1971. Do you think that they cared about the source material?
Sure, of course.
Like, I think they did. They had a point of view.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. That was the one where they really had the point of view. Yeah, totally.
Was it successful?
For Mrs. Jennings alone. Yes.
1981. Do you think they cared about the source material?
Of course they did.
I disagree.
Oh, you don't think so?
I really don't think so.
Oh, interesting.
This one felt so by the numbers. I think they were looking at it going, let's just make sure everything's in there because that's what our audience is expecting.
I guess I tend to think like if you're the BBC and you're doing Jane Austen, you care about Jane Austen at least a little bit.
I don't think the people making it cared.
All right. That's fair.
Was it successful?
No.
Nope.
No, we didn't like it.
1995, did they care about Sense and Sensibility?
Deeply.
Like, deeply. Was it successful?
It was like top 5 movies of all time.
I enjoyed it before. I fucking love it now. I'm so glad that we did it for the show. I love it. It's so good. 2008 miniseries. Do you think they cared about the source material?
I really do. There was so much stuff from the book in this that I didn't see in any other adaptation. They must have gone all the way back to the book.
I agree.
Yay.
Hard agree on that one. Was it successful?
Yes.
Hard agree. Yes.
Great.
It was technically successful.
Well, the best kind of successful.
Because it's good.
Yeah,
like it's good.
It's good.
Of course it's successful. It's not, I'm deeply
not bad.
frustrated with some choices in it, but like it's successful.
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue that point. Well, hey, this was super fun.
It was fun. And our baby slept through the whole thing.
I know. He's such a good kid. Such a good kid. So what's coming up? We got to do Emma at some point. We have a lot of people who are asking about Emma.
Yeah, a lot of people ask about Emma. Well, there's a new Emma out that I'm
Yeah.
so excited to watch. And I've been saving it, obviously. There's also a new David Copperfield out that's like very modern, like not modern. It's set in oldie timey, but like the sensibility of it, I think, is modern.
No, and Jane Austen's David Copperfield is one of my favorite books. Is so good.
I guess I'm just talking about like 19th century literature. We haven't really done any Dickens except Christmas Carol because his books are so long. But maybe someday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But anyway,
yes, Emma. We got to do Persuasion, Mansfield Park. I don't know if there's that many Northanger Abbey adaptations, but I'm sure we can find some.
we might be able to maybe combine a couple of them.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But anyway, this has been Adapter Parish. If you'd like to find us online, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AdaptCast. And if you tweet about the show, don't forget to use the AdaptCast hashtag. You can join our groups on Facebook and Goodreads, and you can also find and follow me on Letterboxd. If you have anything to say that's longer than a tweet, you can always send an email to adapterparishcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, there are 3 great ways that you can do it. First, tell a friend. Second, a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice would be greatly appreciated. And third, we've mentioned it, we are on Patreon. I mentioned it up at the beginning. We have some really cool benefits that we're really excited about for patrons. We have multiple levels that you can give if you want to support the show that way. The show itself will always be free, and just listening is supporting us, which we love. But this is another way to get in contact with us. We have a whole bonus show that we do, and we have a special fan community that we've been running that has been super, super fun, and the conversations that have been happening in it have been really fantastic and really fun. But yeah, thank you for listening.
What's done is done.
Like, if it had been intentionally funny, I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway, yes, you're right. It's a great line. It was so good.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.